Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast live here on Facebook Live or YouTube. Thanks for joining us if you are live on any of those platforms. And while you're here, you can type in any comments or questions that you have. And after we record the podcast, we'll go through and we'll do a Q&A with y'all. So feel free to type in whatever questions you have. This is where we answer cycling and triathlon related questions. So you can submit them at TrainerRoad.com/podcast. And with that, I think we should probably kick off the proper podcast.
Let's do it.
Cool. Welcome to the podcast. It's dedicated to making you a faster cyclist, the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast presented by TrainerRoad. I'm Coach Jonathan Lee with our head coach, Chad Timmerman.
Hi, everybody.
Our CEO, Nate Pearson.
Hello.
And we are going to answer more of your cycling and triathlon related questions today. You can submit them at TrainerRoad.com/podcast. And we'll go through those questions. We read every single one of them. It's a lot of them. And then we put together a list of questions that we feel we can cover that could make for informative and entertaining content for all of you. And we also share a bit from our personal experiences that we are having as we train and race and that sort of a thing. And
you're always supposed to learn something too. So if you don't want to hear about us, just listen to another podcast.
Yeah, but we try to keep it actionable. We had a really big weekend.
Huge weekend.
So we went to, it was team camp weekend over in Northern California this time of year. It's where a lot of teams or pro cycling teams are doing team camp. And we went over, Nate and I went over to the Mark Pro camp and the Cliff Bar camps. We recorded some podcast content that'll be upcoming soon. We're going to talk a little bit about that. I'll probably Nate can cut me off, or I'll cut Nate off when we share too much.
We don't want to do too much, yeah.
But it was we learned a bunch of things.
Like so much.
Where do you want to start?
They're really, really, really fast.
Yes. Yeah, no doubt.
Let's start because cool. I think there's another takeaway with the waxing chains.
Yeah, good point.
So we bought the stuff. We talked about it. We talked about waxing chains. And for those who don't know, you actually dip your chain in wax. And what it's supposed to do is it increases efficiency, so reduces friction. Mm-hmm. Lose less watts on your drivetrain. You might lose like 7 watts would be like a dirty one to a wax chain. Mm-hmm. It stays very clean, and it's supposed to stay silent for like 200 to 400 miles, depending on the conditions that you ride in. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a pain, but once you get it down, it's supposed to be easier. So I started.
Just to clarify really quick, this isn't you're not just dipping it in a candle. This is molten speed wax.
I use molten speed wax, which is I think paraffin wax with a whole bunch of other secret stuff that they add to it to get an extra water to.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that makes sense. So the process, should we go through that?
Yeah, so there's a whole process. The first step of it for waxing your chain is you have to make sure your chain is absolutely clean.
Sparkling clean.
We're talking raw surface. When I say raw surface, I mean really raw.
Pins and all.
Yeah, nothing on any surface at all. And that's actually really hard to do.
Yeah.
People think that it would be like scrubbing your chain with a strong degreaser, and that's not it. It's soaking your chain and agitating it in specific stuff.
So I had I did an old chain and a new chain, and I put it in Simple Green HD, which is one of the things they recommended. And I know people are going to yell at me for doing that, but I put it in a.
When you say they recommended, who's they?
Molten speed wax.
Yeah.
Yep.
I put it in a ultrasonic agitator, like an industrial one that they recommend. Did that for an hour, had it at 6 degrees Celsius. And then there's one mistake I didn't do is I guess with a new chain, it has that new kind of film on it that's horrible.
Yeah.
To get that off, I talked to Molten Speed Wax guys after this, and boy, those guys are passionate about chains.
Yes,
just so you
they
know,
are.
they're so passionate about chains. I learned a lot from them. But you're supposed to put it in a bath of either citrus cleaner or
mineral spirits.
Mineral spirits, that's it, to get that off.
And mineral spirits is harsh stuff.
Yep. And I did it, I just yesterday did it again on a brand new Eagle chain. It took me 7 baths of mineral spirits to get the chain clean.
And that's a brand new chain.
Brand new chain.
How long is that time-wise?
It was 30 minutes.
And it's not just, I can't remember which chain I saw, but it wasn't just the film that was coming off, but there was also there was gunk in there.
That was from a chain that was ridden twice.
Previously? Okay, gotcha.
2 times.
Was there any debris coming out of the new chain, or was it just getting that sticky stuff off?
Pretty much I just kept doing it until the liquid got clear.
Gotcha, okay.
Long story short, I didn't do it right, and I think the other mistake I did is when you put it in the wax, you're supposed to agitate it a bunch.
Mm-hmm. That way it gets in between the rollers and the pins, and instead of just adhering to the outer surface.
Yep.
Okay.
And so then when I started riding, it was making sound, and I thought, maybe it needs to break in a little bit. We got down to Cliff Bar HQ.
Yeah.
We rode. It just kept skipping. Nothing like would stay in there. And
Dry chain.
Yeah.
Basically.
Dry chain with wax globbed on the outside. Yeah.
Oh, and I also ruined my SRAM Red cassette.
Yeah, what did you do with that?
I put that in, what did I put it? Oh, I used like something crazy, denatured alcohol the day before, which you're not supposed to do, or lacquer thinner or something. And a SRAM Red cassette, this is 1132, I didn't realize it, but it has seals in between some of the cogs.
Yeah.
And I thought that was causing it to jump too, or just be really loud.
Yeah.
So
And
day before
it
team
does
camp.
make it loud. Like that's one of the complaints because the SRAM Red cassette's one piece. So when you would shift a gear, it would kind of vibrate throughout the rest of your bike because it was all one unit like that. And it was a big complaint of a lot of people when SRAM Red first started coming out was how loud it was.
Power dome.
Yeah, the power dome as they called it then. Now it's more porous. It has holes throughout it, so it's not just an echo chamber inside. But it's they cleverly added those rubber things in to quiet it down. I don't know if there's another purpose behind it, but the rubber kind of sits in different spots to dampen
Is it
those
still a usable
noises.
cassette or is it garbage?
I don't know. I had so many other things happening. So I went to Mike's Bikes in Berkeley, and I hate being this guy, but I like come up, you're like, dudes, please help. Like, I need this right now. I have to drive like 3 hours after this.
Yeah.
They were great. They like took the bike right back, and did it, and they put a new chain on. And they put a new cassette on too, because with both of that it would shift. So I think the cassette might be bad. Then they're like, hey, come check it out. Front derailleur stops working.
Oh,
And I have an E-tap
oh no.
front derailleur. And it worked right before that. And even the mechanic guy, like, I just saw it work.
And it wasn't a battery deal.
Nope. It
Battery
said it
was
was
fine.
you'd click on it and the light would light up. So it was communicating, and the button on it wouldn't work. So that's a hard part to find too. People don't have front derailleur E-taps laying around. So Mike's Bikes, awesome. They said, go get a coffee. We're going to call around. Came back. Mike's Bike San Francisco has one. So I get in my car, drive from Berkeley to San Francisco at like 4:30 p.m., which is not a good time to do that. Going to that Mike's Bikes, again, they're like, sure, come on Mike back. They're super busy. They helped me out, and they actually took apart. Like, I had to pay for the part, but they took it from a box, and they said they're going to warranty my part and then refund me the money.
Oh, that's cool.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Mike's
That's awesome.
Bikes, holy smokes,
Good
that
job,
was
guys.
awesome. Yep.
So the wax chain, but now you've learned on the wax chain side of things.
Yep. So I tried it again.
Yeah.
And I did it on an Eagle chain, and I'm going to use it for my mountain bike race on Sunday, which is probably pretty stupid. I rode around the parking lot though, and around
Was
the
it quiet?
silent.
Shift well?
Shifted great.
Great.
Yeah. So I'm excited to do this. And
How long is that race?
24 miles.
Okay.
And if we do it,
potentially wet conditions.
yeah.
Yes. It's
Which is-
looking
so it's a big
probably
test.
like it.
Yeah, and another good reason. Well, if we figure out the process, figure out how to do the process, because there is a process. I think we should just wax like 10 or 15 chains at once, and then just switch them out.
Yeah.
Wait until they're all dirty, right? You're
think
all
that's the way to do it.
and start
All
over
at
again.
once. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, and then that'll last us like until 12-speed road comes out or something like that.
Not long. Perhaps this year.
Yeah.
Who
Oh,
knows?
shoot.
But the interesting thing with this, and I want people to understand this because I'm sure people are thinking, why are we talking about chains? But we work. I mean, you get to a point with your fitness where you like strive all year to get like 5 watts on your FTP or something like that. And something like this can save you quite a lot of watts, right? Like they say up to how many watts?
Well,
like 7, I think.
And that's okay. So there's different stuff, and I'm sure some of you are losing like 20 watts on your drivetrain.
Yeah.
Easy.
Yeah.
There's just from a wax chain to like, so if you perfectly clean a chain and you put on wax versus like a bad lube, that can be 7. If you've got dirt and stuff, I don't know how high it could go,
It can be bad.
right? Like, and I've seen some of those, some of your chains are really bad.
Yeah.
And you think, right, you think you just clean the outside and it's good. There's actually tension on the chain. And as you clean it, it can't get, the soap and everything can't get into the pins in between. And then that is, that's where the friction is. Not on the outside. There's no friction on the outside.
Right.
Just
Yeah,
a
I
little
mean,
noise out there.
yeah, there can be some friction. Obviously, if you have that, the rollers between the cogs and everything.
Yeah,
else.
between
but,
cogs, yeah.
But it's minimal compared to the friction, the internal friction, to let those little pins roll. So
We also found out there's a YPN quick link that's
Okay.
you're supposed to be able to reuse 5 times,
and is that just a road 11-speed one?
and an Eagle one,
Eagle
11
one, too?
or Eagle.
Ooh.
And so you can take that off, and then the easy, I think the simplest way to clean your chain well, put it in a citrus degreaser in like a little bottle and just shake with your hand.
Yeah.
And then once you'll get a bunch of stuff out, do that a few times to get it really clean. That I would leave it overnight or something like that.
Yep.
But they said a citrus would be good on that one.
Huh. Awesome. Good stuff. So that you got your chain all fixed though. That was all good. And then we headed off to team camp. So the first day we rode with Cliff Bar. They were just doing a really short ride, more like a sponsor media ride. They had to get some video content for a project that they're working on, and they were visiting Cliff Bar that day, getting all like the bikes built and all that stuff from the new sponsors. But we did a short ride there. You missed out on that ride, I think.
Yeah, I decided to sleep in.
Yeah, not a bad idea. But we did that ride, and we got, I just wanted to share this, we got a top 10 across the Golden Gate Bridge, or sorry, the Bay Bridge on the way to Treasure Island.
Did you really?
Yes, we did. But it was not because of Team Cliff Bar. It was because of a guy on an e-bike that was just sitting there wide open, and we dropped into his draft. So, but yeah, it was just an easy ride. We rode in the Oakland Hills after that, which is a great area. But the next day, and then we then stayed with the Cliff guys that night, recorded a podcast, ate extremely well. They ate really well. I learned that on that I guess on this trip is that the pros eat extremely well, which I'm not a big surprise. But then Mark Pro Camp was pretty tough. The next day.
Yeah.
They ruined me for team camps.
So
I'm done.
we probably don't. That'll be in the next podcast where we get released.
Will be. Yeah. But we should talk a bit about the TT, should we not?
Sure.
Yeah. So their team camp, and you'll hear more about this in the upcoming podcast, the specifics on it. But it's pretty serious, like there are things being accomplished by that team manager and those riders during those races.
They do not mess around.
Nope. And we had a TT, an uphill TT. It was 20 minutes. Bowfax is the climb. It's a popular climb in Marin County. And you and I were not close to the top guys.
No, we were not.
We weren't bad overall, but in terms of like...
we didn't beat a single rider.
No, amongst the other folks, though. I'm saying just general folks, you know, fast, but against these guys.
Yeah, so to give you guys...
It was intense.
I did 367 for 24 minutes.
Yeah.
And Jonathan beat me by 13 seconds.
Yeah.
Jerk. And then I think we were like probably 25 seconds behind the slowest guy on the team. Yep.
It's just pretty gnarly.
The first guy did incredible power, but kudos to our product manager, Brandon Need, who's he was also there. He got third overall in the climb.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
He did 350 for 19 minutes at 135 pounds.
135 pounds.
Yep.
That's
and
crazy.
very, very, very fast. And triathlete.
Yeah.
I just like to throw that in every time.
It was pretty awesome. So it was a good time. We learned a lot. We'll have some great takeaways on team camps and how to use those team camps, because a lot of you say, I've got this riding vacation coming up with my friends, or I'm going to have this block of time where I can really train, that sort of a thing. So we cover from a lot of different perspectives, and you'll hear this in that podcast episode, what you can do to utilize that time and how that relates to your race goals, all that stuff. So what do you want to cover next, though, Nate?
Okay, so let's just compare and contrast Cliff Bar versus Mark Pro.
Okay.
Mark Pro, Phil is like on it. Like he's very, not that Dylan wasn't on it, but he's got a purpose. He wants people to go to bed early.
Phil's the director
of Mark Pro.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Mm-hmm. He's a director of Mark Pro, been on the podcast before and is going to be on soon.
Yep.
He's very much like, we need to get these guys through. You need to get in bed. You need to sit down, get recovered, get your Mark Pro on, which is a recovery tool they use.
If he sees guys standing up, he's like, lay down, put on a Mark Pro.
Yep.
He's
the food was all pre-prepared by a Michelin star chef in little bowls.
Matt Acarino. Yeah. And he's an incredible cyclist himself. So, and he cooks for... he's cooked for Hollow Esco Citadel, for Peter Sagan when he's in the region and everything. He's next level. So
yeah, very, very like, they're still goofing around and taking funny pictures and stuff.
Yeah.
But more serious. And then on Cliff Bar's hugs, stories, like hanging out, staying up till midnight or 1.
Yep.
So much drinking. Like
it's bonding, right?
Yeah,
like
it's bonding.
That's what they were going after. And Dylan, the team manager, recognizes that value, and that's what he's really trying to foster.
Yeah, exactly. So his goal is bonding, and he does a great job because it feels like bonding.
It feels like a family.
Yeah, it does. Yep. Mark Pro, they actually went and got body fat scans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Mark Pro, or the Cliff Bar guys, I said, what would happen if we did that? And they said, they expletive you. That would not happen.
Yeah.
At Mark Pro, the entire camp, there was one beer in the fridge
Yeah.
And it was from an ex-Cliff Bar guy brought it.
And it's funny. It doesn't mean like in the end, that doesn't mean that one team is going to be more successful than another. Like it's just the team recognizes different needs and then they thusly fulfill those. So
you have different aims too, different types of races. They know what they're doing.
Good point.
Yeah. And it's crit racing too, right? So they're doing flat, fast races.
Yeah.
Versus Mark Pro is doing hilly road races and like
Some
power to
crits
weight.
too.
Yeah, but it's
but mostly road racing.
yeah. One other thing that I noticed just talking with everybody and hanging out, Cliff Bar, they kind of like they start with tactics. And they value tactics, especially in crit racing, over all else. Strongest guy doesn't win the race, right? It's tactics. You really want to put out the least amount of power. On Mark Pro, although I'm sure, and then too, going back on Cliff Bar, they have really strong people, right? Not that they're weak. Like I was riding with them, man, they can attack so hard.
Yeah.
So from a high wattage. I was doing like 350, and this guy just like, boom, just explodes away.
Yeah.
On Mark Pro, they also know tactics, but they're kind of like, they come from power to weight, kind of like power and fitness is like kind of where they start.
Yeah.
And being low body fat, high watts.
Yeah.
It's just interesting what the two teams
greater emphasis on conditioning with the Mark Pro team, and then it's still clearly a conditioning is a concern with Cliff Bar, but they're more about team building, at least right now.
Yep.
And tactics always.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be I think that podcast will be really good. It's going to be a bit of a different style for y'all too. So check your feeds for that. It obviously won't be live. We already recorded the stuff. So but check your feeds for that in the podcast.
Dudes, there's one more thing I have to bring up.
Yeah.
So over the course of Cliff Bar's heavy alcohol indulgence,
yes,
something came
It
about.
was like 10 o'clock at night on the last night. And I asked Pete if he's going to wear the TR kit in our crits here.
Pete Morris. He works for TrainerRoad as a product manager, but you've seen him in different videos for Cliff Bar and for TrainerRoad, everything else. He's one of the main guys there at the Cliff Bar team.
Yep, accomplished racer, crit racer. He said that, I got to wear the Cliff Bar stuff, but he's going to beat 6 TrainerRoad people versus just him at our local crit series here.
Every single time he said it's impossible for any of us to beat him.
Impossible, 100% chance that he will win. There is no scenario that he win. And I'm the only one there. Jonathan's already gone. Yeah. And the entire Cliff Bar team is just like, there's no way. There's impossible. So I came back to here and like we've got pro racers, right? And I'm a road like hill climbers rather than that, but we've got a pretty stacked field.
We've got 6 very capable riders versus 1 very capable rider.
Yeah, and so
you do the math.
I like that.
Anyways, the fire and smack talk, like the 40K TT stuff, this is 10x everything that we've talked about.
It's getting pretty deep.
It started with smack talk.
Yeah, and so Pete too, he just did the cherry pie crit. He did 406 normalized for 46 minutes. So
it's pretty hard.
He's strong.
He's not short on power. That's clear.
No, that's for sure. It's good. So we're gonna take advantage of this though, to actually like develop some strategy and some content and share it with you guys about how David's
the various
take down
ways
a
we're going
Goliath.
to beat him.
Yeah. So it's gonna be good. So stay tuned for that.
And Pete can listen and hear our strategy because really, if with our strategy, it's impossible, right? It should be.
Should be.
So,
6 versus 1 better be.
And Jonathan's going to do a GoPro and send it to the Cliff Bar guys after we beat him. We just got to beat him once.
All right. With all that, anything else that we need to cover before we get into...
Let's do it.
All right. Let's get into Mark's question. He says, I'm a 4-year triathlete, but I'd like to do other sports also. I've ridden Iceman 3 years with moderate success. If those don't know, Iceman, that's the race that I think I hear about that race more than any other from people riding in all the time. It's in Michigan, and it's an endurance mountain bike race.
Iceman cometh?
Yes, that's the one. So anyways, it's a very popular race down there. So he says he's ridden it with 3 years with moderate success. This year, I'm doing Leadville. I don't know where to start. I hear Leadville mentions on the podcast, but have you ever thought about doing a Leadville-specific episode? So we haven't really talked a whole lot about Leadville, even though all 3 of us are planning on doing Leadville this year. Chad and I still have to qualify.
Right, and we do have a pretty extensive blog post on this very matter.
Absolutely. Good plug, Chad. That was fantastic.
Good job, Chad.
But we haven't talked a whole lot about it here on the podcast this year, even though that's one of the main goals for us this year, because the 40K TT looms large in the foreground.
Yep. And it's not just a goal in the sense that we want to finish it. We actually are targeting a Sub-8 finishing time.
Yeah.
Are we all?
Yeah.
Yeah, why
I think we can all
I
do
said
it.
sub
We can go
9.
after it. We can go after it. Doesn't mean we'll get it, but it's a
You
good
can
goal.
do Sub-8. Yep.
Cool.
Yeah,
Thanks, Jonathan.
It's a good goal. Looking at the numbers that Jonathan plotted out, and we'll get to that. It's a good goal.
Yeah, so I mean, Leadville, I think everybody knows what Leadville is, but endurance mountain bike race, about 100 miles, about 10,000 or nearly 11,000 feet of climbing, and it's definitely so the average elevation, I believe, is 10,000 feet during the race, and you tip up toward 12,000, I believe,
I think
perhaps a little
14.
over. Oh,
Yeah,
so
I'm pretty sure 14.
high elevation stuff. And this is a huge, massive race. Qualifying is tough to get in. The lottery is really tough to get in. It's a whole deal. It's not a technical mountain bike race in terms of the terrain. It's not single tracky. It's not technical rocks or anything like that.
Yeah, the necessary conditioning is more in line with a long road race. Obviously, a very long road race.
Absolutely. So when people talk about plans that they should pick to follow to prepare for this, base training, we usually recommend sweet spot base. Sustained power build is what I would recommend thereafter. And then if you're going to go into something from there, the 40 KTT plan isn't a bad idea.
Mm-hmm.
Century plan.
Yes, anything that focuses primarily on muscle endurance. I mean, you just got to keep on it for a long time.
Climbing road race might not be a bad choice either.
Nah, I don't think so. I don't think it's a good fit for this. There's a lot of there's a dynamic aspect to all the road race plans that you won't really need here. I don't think so.
Gotcha.
Chad, I was planning on doing the crit plan to smash Pete.
I know. He's totally pulling you off course, but whatever.
It's gonna be.
I'm
funny.
serious about that too.
Yeah. So the thing is, with a race, it's 100 miles. Clearly, nutrition is a huge.
Yeah, and we're talking 100 miles on the dirt too, with a fair amount of elevation over the course of it and at elevation. So. It's going to be a long day.
Can you put 8 hours in perspective for Leadville?
Yeah, so most people, because 100 miles, people are thinking, oh, that sounds really
8
slow.
8 hours is no automatic.
No, it's pretty tough. Very, very, very few people go under 8 hours in the grand scheme of things. The average finish, I believe, at Leadville is somewhere around 10.5 to 11 hours. So you can see
you get
how difficult
a special
that would be.
Big belt buckle for going under 9.
Under 9, then you get a special one, I think, for going under 8. The fastest time I think ever maybe was just under 6 hours, which is insane. And I believe that was by Howard Grotz last year. So I could be wrong on that in terms of like if that was the fastest ever. But the top guys are really fast. But Todd Wells last year, he's retired now. But when he did it, he had very small aero bars on his mountain bike. They do things like they use shoe covers. They have aero helmets, not like a full TT helmet, but they have an aero road helmet.
Skin suits?
Skin suits. They'll have road pedals and road shoes, that sort of a thing to really try to focus on efficiency first and aerodynamic efficiency before you go deeper into that. So with this, it's kind of like I think that Leadville in many respects is more similar to a road race than it is a mountain bike race. And something that we're planning on doing with this is we're planning on using skin suits. We're planning on using aero road helmets. We're doing all of that stuff. Wax chains there for sure.
Aero bars, anybody?
Yeah, I'm thinking of doing something, at least if it's not going to be like a little bit in front there, like aero bars to hold on to, at least some padding or a different hand position to help me get a little more aero.
I'll experiment. I know that it's just uncomfortable too.
Yeah.
But maybe because there's a road section,
right?
right?
Especially there's not a whole lot of hand positions. You can't. It's not like drop bars where you can put them in at least 3 different places.
Yeah. Road. With road stuff, with getting into those aero positions. Once again, on a mountain bike, you have to make sure that that's something that you can sustain, and it will be an imperfect surface. There's road, but there's a lot of dirt sections where it would really benefit you, just dirt road, to get into that aero position. So you have to make sure that it's not just like a precariously perched position, but one that you can sustain and have some control. So it's kind of a tricky balance. Putting it back, but I drifted from your question. Yeah. Putting it back into perspective for all of us, let's start with Chad. For Chad, for you to do 8 hours.
Yeah, and we got to take into account our body weight or our anticipated body weight.
Yeah, we used Best Bike Split for this, and I actually used Eldon Nelson, a.k.a. the Fat Cyclist. I used his 8 hours and 8 minutes time.
I just missed it.
So close, which is a really impressive time that he had. I used that one, and I worked backwards on Best Bike Split in a very unscientific manner, but I think that this might get us close. And I basically worked backwards, and I asked him for a lot of data to make sure that I could adjust the rolling resistance, the mechanical loss, and then the CDA to a point where I could replicate the time that he did for the wattage that he did, everything else. So, and then I used that and applied it for us. So it's probably close, but might not be spot on. for you, Chad, for you to go sub-8, just under 8, you would have to do an average power of 224 and a normalized for 234 for that long for 8 hours.
Yeah.
Then Nate, you're practically exactly the same.
Because our weight's going to be within a couple pounds of one another.
Yep, really close. And for me, it's only I have to do average power of 192 and then a normalized power of 200 watts. So looking at that, that doesn't sound like it's that tough. But when keep in mind your average 10,000 foot elevation, that's going to get really tough.
And for 8 hours. I mean, this isn't just a 4 or 5 hour century.
It's a full work day.
Well, at a 345 FTP, that's still 234.67.
It's pretty rough, man.
Yeah, 0.67 intensity factor for 9 hours or for 8 hours that's a lot. Like
no, this, like I said, it's a lofty goal. It's not one that's guaranteed at all. We're gonna have to work for it.
Yeah,
but it's not unattainable.
For me to be at like 345 to there, I have to go into it at like 365.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then be conditioned to do that long stuff, and then nail my nutrition.
Timing wise, though, this lines up. I mean, considering what we should bring into the 40K TT, the gap between the 40K TT and this, it does work out. That's why I'm optimistic.
Yeah, I'm thinking after the 40K TT plan, or what are you thinking actually on the training, Chad? What would you do in an ideal
Honestly,
stretch?
I haven't given that much thought. Don't put me on the spot.
Because we have about 3 months in between
that
and then Leadville. So we have 3 months of time where we'll have built up to a peak for a 40K TT, and then we can kind of reset from there. I'm thinking that I'm just going back to the drawing board and working on more sustained
that's the thing.
power.
It gets complex for us because we have a lot of other things, and they don't commingle too well.
Especially your crit training.
I'm going to do 2 crit plans in a row.
Yeah, see, so I'm going to have to play it by ear at that point, too, depending on what's more important.
Yeah, you know what, too? It's after that 40K TT, I think I'm going to say, what is my fire burning my belly more? Is it to really like, it's a good advice for people. Like, should I go, am I really want to do a sub-9? I really just want to do sub-9 at Leadville?
Yeah.
Or do I want to do Pete? And they're not going to be, or beat Pete.
Yeah, beat
Sound
Pete.
bad.
Yeah.
They're not the same. They're totally different energy systems. And although I probably both will make me a faster cyclist, I won't be as fast as I could be if I specialized in one of those races.
Yeah, that's a good point. So we're going to be talking a lot about Leadville as the summer comes closer. And if anybody is doing Leadville, like we said, the recommended plan progression, we really think sustained power build's a good idea. And then we really think that going through and doing the 40K TT plan or the Century plan, that could be a great idea. The one thing I just keep reminding myself even now about Leadville is just don't cross that line. When you're up at 10,000 feet, and if you go push too hard, too early, that sort of a thing, you pay dearly for that. And then it can be the type of thing that you just don't recover from.
8-hour race in general. Like, you think about an Ironman. That's what it feels to me like an Ironman, but a little less than an Ironman actually.
Yeah. So it's gonna be pretty darn tough, and it's gonna be cool to check that off the list and then go firsthand through a lot of what you already have gone through. The people listening to this, so it should help us be better prepared.
What about you're gonna do a hardtail, right? Hardtail mountain bike, canyon.
Yep.
I'm gonna be on my Specialized Epic, and you'll be on a Sweet Yeti.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Sweet. Okay, so that's you're gonna be full suspension, Sweet Yeti.
Yeah.
Hardtail.
Yep.
Full suspension.
Yeah.
Cool. Because that's one question that people always have is should I do a hardtail or full suspension?
And it's interesting. I would think that the best bike would be an extremely efficient full suspension because when you think about the micro bumps and undulations that you go over, those start to add up in fatigue and stopping your momentum, where with a full suspension, you'd be able to soak those up. That said, most full suspension bikes are not as efficient and they just don't get as close to.
And what about a hardtail with high volume tires?
Yeah, it could be a good option.
We'll see. I hope so.
And the other thing is higher volume tires in a lot of cases, not all, but if you pick the right tires and the right rim width, you can get away with less rolling resistance that way, or at least assumed less rolling resistance. I can't say it's proven, so that could help. But weight is one thing where on this race it matters a lot because there are really long climbs.
Yeah, especially if you're carrying a fair amount of body weight into the event.
Yeah, so you're really you're not looking to get a really knobby tire for traction. In this case, you're really looking to get a tire that rolls fast and that isn't going to be too heavy. But once again, I mean, it's a 100-mile day. That's a lot of terrain to cover. That's plenty of rocks that could slash a sidewall. So you have to count on that too.
And on this race, Chad, the winner has been on a hardtail some years and some years full suspension.
Yeah.
So it's not that one is. It's not that it's like every year.
There's no obvious bet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think in just the past 2 maybe 3 years since suspension has really stepped up in terms of the valving and everything else. They've gotten much better at locking out, like locking fully out, which can help with that efficiency side of things for a full suspension bike. Whereas in the past, even though you had a lockout, it still had some squish and some loss.
Chad's lockout
on the fork
is
on the
serious.
hardtail? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, so on the road section,
like a
he'll lock
rigid
that
fork.
out.
And locking out a fork, I just want to cover that really quick. I think that locking out a fork makes sense if you're out of the saddle. It makes sense if you're going through a bunch of bumps and you feel like you can maintain momentum with it locked out. But in most cases, if you have a bumpy surface, that fork being unlocked can help you maintain more momentum. It isn't necessarily faster. If you think about it, you're putting that weight and everything through the rear wheel. So when you lock the front, I would just lock the front if I'm out of the saddle. Otherwise, I would probably just have it
What about
unlocked.
asphalt road?
Even then, I would, unless it's perfectly smooth.
Yeah, if it's perfect, like if it's a street,
smooth,
you would lock it.
Yeah, but even, I
So
would.
you're talking about negating the vertical oscillation.
Exactly right. Yeah, because there are situations where even on a smooth road, but let's say it has like a crack every 10, like a substantial crack every so often, that sort of a thing. If you unlock that fork, that might even be faster, right? Because it allows you to maintain more.
I'll play with that. I have 100 miles to do so.
Unlocked fork on California roads.
Yeah, exactly.
Those things are horrible.
Those things are worse than single track sometimes. Let's get into Tomo's question. He says, hey guys, I'm a recreational mountain bike rider and I want to improve my sprint speed and power specifically on short uphill sections. Can you advise a course of action I could take? Thanks from Tomo. Short question.
Yeah, so Tomo, since you didn't specify the actual duration of these short uphill stretches, let's look at it in 3 different contexts. First is like an actual sprint, which is anything that lasts maybe up to 30 seconds. I mean, a lot of people can't sprint full out for 30 seconds. That's something that has to be cultivated. Yeah. So it's not really a sprint at 30 seconds. Typically it's more like 10 to 20 seconds, but going to assume that's not what you're talking about. You're looking about something longer than that. If it were, that's something we've addressed in the past where you do it with stomps and you do it with real high force repetitions in a big gear. Yeah. Wind it up, learn how to generate speed or learn how to generate power at a really slow, low cadence.
Something that I want to add to that really quick is the courses that I see with that are a lot of the time if you have short track cross country courses. Yeah. Mm-hmm. This year, Eliminator cross country is coming back at the World Cup level. I know that applies to very few of us, but I could see that genre catching on because it's like it doesn't require a lot of terrain. It can be done in a short area, and it'd be fun. Like 4 guys head to head, and it's like bracket racing, basically.
And in that case, something actually cultivating a true sprint would be LA for sure.
Yeah, and I think of like a course where this is pretty helpful is a course like a Benelli, which may be the Olympic course when LA has the Olympics. It's down in LA. It's a very popular race venue because the Pro XCT series has gone to it year after year after year for quite some time now. But that course has just steep little, like I'd say 10 or like 15 to 30 second over and over and over and over. It's like 7 or 8 of them.
And I'm guessing the fast guys really get after each one of them.
Yeah, it's amazing to see what they can do. Right. So yeah, I guess that there is probably some situations where this is there, but like you said, it's probably less likely. It's probably a little more sustainable.
In his question, if he's talking about short uphill sections, I'm going to assume he means longer than 30 seconds.
Yeah.
So then it comes down to, is this an anaerobic effort or a VO2 max effort? And as always, there's not like a discrete switch between those two. They blend into one another. But most people limit it to anything under 2 minutes is going to be primarily anaerobically driven. I mean, actually, it becomes increasingly aerobic once you're over like, I think 70 seconds. But let's not split hairs. Let's just say if it's under 2 minutes, we're going to focus on anaerobic conditioning. If it's over, we're going to focus more on VO2 max conditioning.
Awesome.
And it's really that simple. So then you just choose a plan that has a preponderance of those sort of specialized workouts. So this is stuff you're going to encounter to a lesser extent in your build plans and to a greater extent in your specialty plans. So look for something that has something that replicates whatever those durations you need are. If you know these are 1 or 2 minute, then look for something that's heavy on the anaerobic side. Anything that's longer in a couple minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, look for something that's heavy on the VO2 max work.
Jonathan, so if Tomo is a recreational mountain bike rider doing those short hill climbs, how maybe Tomo's really getting out of the saddle, pumping, let's go back to the last question, might not be on the most efficient bike.
Oh, yeah.
Could that be a big problem too?
Yeah, I've seen that a lot. People get out of the saddle and they hammer and their bike is soaking up a lot of that energy,
Yeah, especially if you have like a trail bike, right, rather than a cross-country race bike.
Yeah, and I'm going to get technical on this one in just a bit, but getting back to that, I think that I think that a lot of people, when you see those climbs, don't be afraid to use a lockout. I know this is just marketing speak from RockShox, but when they had that dual, it's called it's the X-Lock, full sprint, something like that, full sprint X-Lock. And it's the one plunger and it locks out front and rear. And they said kind of in a quirky way in their marketing for it, they're like, we are using this more than our dropper post and even more than our shifter a lot of the times. And I think that that's a good idea. If you have a lockout with a lever on your bars and you have a bike that is prone to bobbing, then you should use that thing regularly, but go in and out. That doesn't mean just stay locked. Use it intelligently. If it's a really bumpy climb, sacrifice a bit of efficiency in terms of being bobby to be able to keep traction on the ground, right? And it's maybe some forward momentum. So you always want to try to weigh those pros and cons like we were just talking about with the fork being locked out. But this is stepping back from this a bit. This is why I think cross-country riders should favor designs with high anti-squat. An anti-squat is a characteristic that can be designed into rear suspension that basically means that the bike sits higher in its travel when you sit on it, and it likes to sit higher. It doesn't like to sink in and kind of settle. It likes to stay high. For cross-country, that can be extremely helpful because you get greater resistance in most cases to pushing through and getting into a soft, less stable spot where it soaks up a lot of energy. I very rarely actually lock out my bike on my ASR. And that one just has a standard single pivot, kind of an old school design, but it actually has a pretty good amount of anti-squat for being a single pivot design. So I don't feel like I have to lock it out. In fact, the only time I do is if I'm on road. So, and that's because it stays high. If I pedal and I throw some weight into it, it doesn't feel like it's soaking it up. So when you look at bikes, I would look online and try to research which bikes have low anti-squat values, and that is, I think, a great characteristic of a cross-country bike.
So if someone does have a trail bike, could a great upgrade to race be a lockout?
Yeah, absolutely. It can help massively. The tricky thing about that is, in most cases, you're really going to want to lock out the rear there. That's what we're probably talking about. And usually the shock comes with the lockout, or you have to buy a different shock altogether to get that. It can be done, and I would recommend looking at used markets in that case because you can find people pulling a shock off a bike and selling it brand new that might have that. But it's not as simple as just tossing a lockout on, unfortunately. Usually it's a different shock.
So if they are, Chad, doing anaerobic, and I'm thinking back to my last race, lots of steep, short 15% grade for
that's
5
what
seconds.
I was getting to. So in terms of the conditioning, you look at any of the specialized workouts in any of the mountain bike clients, really, and you see a blend of two things. One is anaerobic repeats with a fair amount of recovery in between them, so that each one of them is meaningful. You're not just trying to grind yourself down with hard repeat right after hard repeat right after hard repeat. Rather, you're trying to dole out a whole lot of power, rest well enough so that you can dole out a whole lot of power again and again over the course of a workout, so that you can build your capacity for these anaerobic bursts.
Yeah.
Then you'll see probably later in the week, maybe later in the plan, efforts where you start to string those together a little more closely so it gets a little more close to the demands of what Nate's describing, actual race demands, where you have to be able to put out high power, don't get a whole lot of recovery, then you got to do it again. So it becomes a little more about repeatable power, less about capacity.
When I think of cross-country racers or crit racers even have like similar demands in that respect.
Absolutely, there's
like
a ton of overlap. Yep.
I see low-hanging fruit that's passed by many times by these type of racers, and what they do is they focus on the work intervals and they get those done, but then they're lenient with their rest intervals. And I think that with this type of racing specifically, and I say rest, I mean just the periods in between the really hard hits. And I think that if you let that duration slide, and don't get me wrong, if you're too tired to do it, but if you let that duration slide, or perhaps, it's holding you at a specific wattage and you're like, it's not a work interval, I can drop it down. I feel like that's a spot where it's low-hanging fruit that if you can really be diligent with your rest intervals, just as with your work intervals.
Yeah, honestly, I wouldn't even concern. At some point, just stop worrying about capacity. Worry about how well you can repeat these things. I mean, again, it's a matter of specialization, or in coaching ease. It's specificity. I mean, it has to be super specific to what you're going to do out there, or something's just not going to carry as well as you'd like it to.
So what you're saying is, rather than focusing on keep raising my wattage at 30 seconds, how many times could I do that same wattage? Can I do it 7? Can I do it 8? Can I do it 12, 15?
Yeah. How close maybe, can I put those together?
Maybe you're concerned with 20-second power for a while. Get your 20-second power as high as you can get it. I mean, there will come a point where you're fighting for gains that just aren't worth the effort.
Yeah.
When you recognize that, if you recognize that, then you got to realize, so I got my 2-minute power up to X watts. Now I want to be able to do X minus X watts 30 times for 10 seconds with short little rests in between because I know these are the demands of the races I'm going to do.
And especially for mountain bike racing, I think that is the key, is the repeatability.
Oh, it absolutely is.
Where crit might be, you might just want maximum 2-minute power.
I mean, depending on how you're going to race it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about crits for going back to Cliff Bar.
Yeah.
When we had this conversation, we literally talked for 90 minutes going through all the scenarios that we could throw at Pete.
Yeah.
And we'll talk.
We still couldn't pull it off.
No, there was one scenario. Can we just talk about it right now real quick?
Sure,
The one scenario that if we do this, execute this right, is we pretty much attack one after the other. So one guy goes off, Pete has to cover, and while Pete covers, we cover him.
And the reason that he has to cover is
You have
because
6 guys.
he cannot. It's impossible for him to lose to even one of us. So
Exactly, it's a team effort. If the team wins, TrainerRoad wins.
I can't think of any rider, Peter Sagan included, who can go out and beat 6 not nearly strong, but like even if we're like 75% as strong as him, 75%. These guys are 75% as strong as Sagan. 6 of them can't beat him.
Yeah,
No.
right. Yeah,
So
I get what you mean. Yeah.
The key to this, though, is when so we have to then follow Pete, right, and bring up everyone else fresh.
We just counter.
And then as soon as it gets close, before Pete lets up on the gas,
that's
the
when
next
you counter.
person goes.
You don't wait till it's all back together to counter.
Well, you don't see, and they said, I don't think they think our tactical experience is that well. We're going to work as a team, and maybe we're not. We're going to work better, but if we let the field come back and wait for 15, 20 seconds, 30 seconds,
We don't
like
even
it is a
wait till
rest interval.
We don't
you
even
never
wait till
wait.
it touches back together.
Exactly. And that's a good,
again.
it's just like the workout, right? Like in the workout, you might have 20 seconds rest and you can do 30 of them.
Quite a lot.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
But if you try to put all that 30 into one block,
Yeah.
you can't, it's humanly
No,
impossible.
that's the nature of intervals. That's why we do intervals.
I know, but so we're not going to give Pete intervals. We're going to give him one sustained block at 7,000% FTP.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's actually a common thing that I hear with a lot of people writing on their questions about microbursts. They say, I'm fine through the first however many, but then I hit a point where I can't go anymore. And I have to either skip one or I have to just backpedal for a bit and then go at it again.
And that's a capacity of a different nature, but it's still something you can grow.
And I think that's what you're trying to do basically when you that tactical option is you're basically trying to shrink those or get them to the point where they may think they can sustain that 5-second break in between efforts, whatever it is. But then if that happens time after time after time, it gets pretty tough. So
Pete's a strong guy. He's a smart guy. He's a tough guy. But there are human boundaries that he just can't exceed.
we'll see. Anyways, with the mountain bike stuff and just going back with that, I just recommend, like you mentioned, pick a plan that represents that. The cross country Olympic plan is awesome for that. The short track plan is good for that.
And something we didn't mention with Leadville is a cross country marathon plan. So if you really did want to approach this as a mountain bike race, that would be the closest fit other than sustained or 40K TT
Or Century.
Good plug. Yeah, like that. Awesome. Jerry says, I've been using TrainerRoad for about 1.5 years and find it the best thing for me to stay in shape. I especially like that you let me find my own entertainment and music rather than forcing your choices on me like so many other apps.
Good man, Jerry. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very conscious choice of ours. Like we all have different tastes and we get that, so we don't want to force it on you. You know, you can, and we want to design things so that you can bring whatever you want. Like that's like it's designed that way.
You guys have those playlists you put up, the trainer. I don't like your guys' playlists.
Oh yeah.
I just expect people to.
Yeah.
That's
Exactly.
the whole
it's
point of
different,
it.
right?
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
art or whatever.
Yeah,
like
like
something different.
That was the biggest nightmare of the bike classes, and that was 7 other riders. And I could never make it work.
Yeah,
Could you pick another song, please?
Change the song. It's ruining my watts. He says, in the last podcast, Chad mentioned a problem with taking salt tablets. I think he said something about there being a problem with the chloride. Could you explain this further? I ask because I add a mixture of sodium chloride and potassium chloride to fruit juice or peach tea for something different to drink on a ride for the trainer. Should I avoid this? Thanks for all the good information on the podcast.
Well, the first thing to ask yourself is if you're experiencing any form of gastric distress. So if not, maybe it's not an issue for you. But in most people's case, the concern is with sweat loss, electrolyte loss, right? It's not just water coming out. We're losing electrolytes, and those are harder to replenish than water. It's a more conscious act. Primarily what we lose, about 90% of the electrolytes we lose in sweat is sodium chloride. But the sodium is the big aspect of that. We don't lose chloride at the same rate, or if we do, we don't need to replace it at the same rate. But the fact is, if you are replacing them at the same rate, you need the sodium. You don't need all that chloride, so this creates a chloride excess.
Gotcha.
And that creates a host of reasons. And Stacy Sims in particular describes it as interfering with the membrane potential of our intestinal cells. And what happens then is those cells open up, they release endotoxins, and we get severe water flux. Put more blatantly, it's diarrhea. And in some cases, depending on the amount of chloride excess, severe diarrhea. That can be a real game changer in terms of workouts, certainly races.
Wait, so if you take too much calcium, you
Chloride.
can get chloride. Sorry, chloride. You can get diarrhea?
Yeah.
Because I always, in all my long races, at the very end of my triathlons,
Salt tablets.
I'd get diarrhea.
Salt tablets.
Because I was taking salt
tablets, and I mean, there's all forms of stress on the body and the heat.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stuff going on.
I was
but
taking salt
chloride doesn't
tablets.
help.
And then
Most long course triathletes,
So many-
ultra distance do.
I've lost to a friend. And so all my races are always friend versus friend.
Yeah.
But by 7 seconds, and I had like 2 minutes in the porta potty from.
Oh man.
Yeah, there you go. And you weren't
just
the only one in there.
Opened up my eyes.
Okay, so Scratch Labs, for this very reason, uses sodium citrate. And they do it for a number of reasons, actually, the least of which, or not the least of which, is that it's a lot easier on the gut.
That makes sense. And that's what I've found, and I don't know if that's exactly what causes it to be easier on my gut or doesn't cause problems with me, but I've noticed that when I switched away from all other things and I went to Scratch Labs, that it was effective at not making me sick.
Yeah, and it's
that
not just
was good enough for me.
I mean, even if it's just a fluid replacement, whatever kind, as long as it doesn't heap in the chloride at the same rate as it's replenishing the sodium. I mean, basically, these drinks are focused on restoring sodium levels, along with it goes hand in hand with hydration.
I have another plug. Cliff Bar doesn't give us any money or anything.
No,
right?
no, they don't.
But at the camp, they had these like little packets. They're like food, almost like what we'd give to your kid. And they had a mix of there was one with like sweet potatoes, one with applesauce and quinoa, and they're made to be used during the ride. I had them during the ride, and it was.
Yeah, they're like the sauce packets.
Yeah.
They're awesome.
They're
Also
awesome.
slower burning carbohydrate.
Yeah, and I thought it would be great too on the trainer because sometimes I'm like, I don't want to eat chews all the time. But those, it's like, I'm eating applesauce and quinoa. Like
they have like a banana mango coconut one. I think that is like life changing. I could just drink that stuff.
I'd like to.
It's actually good.
We need to get some because I like to experiment to see if I get the same. Because that's my only concern is that it's not quick burning enough for while your workout.
Yeah. You mentioned that, and I can't remember which listener it was, but a few weeks back talked about toast and jam prior to the ride. And we informed him, do it like literally as you're sitting on the bike warming up. I've been doing that very thing lately. No gastric distress whatsoever. I mean, no digestive issues at all. And I feel really good for the first half of my workout. And then I get on top of the nutrition for the latter half of it. And it's all panning out quite well.
One more gastric distress thing.
Yeah.
We didn't mention this, but on Sunday, we rode with the founder of Cliff Bar.
Yeah.
It was this 7 flat ride, very long. But before the end, we stopped at his like wine restaurant thing. There's a big table laid out. Boy, we felt like rock stars.
Yeah.
And the Cliff Bar guys, I swear some of them drink a bottle of wine each. And then we had a 40-minute climb afterwards.
That's my kind of cycling team right there.
This guy, Jazz, on the climb, he stopped and threw up twice.
Boot and rally.
Yes, exactly. And still, I was going hard because I was trying to beat up the climb, which I did. Yeah. And at the top, I then rode with some other really strong guys.
Yeah.
They were kind of drunk, and they still dropped me. Like, it's just amazing how strong they
strong
are.
riders, man. Let's go into Connor's question. He says, can I peak twice in 1 year using TrainerRoad's plans? I have an Olympic triathlon early in May, and then I have a half Ironman in late August. I would like to be competitive in both, so I'm wondering, can I peak for both since they are fairly spread out? And if so, what would the best strategy be to do so? But before we get into this is one of the most common questions we get is I've got 2 races. How do I peak between them? You can go onto our blog, and we actually have multiple posts where we've actually laid out how to, whether it's peak twice in one season or how to train between peaks. You can look that up on the blog, and you can find out some really applicable information that could help you on that. But we figured it was worth revisiting again. So
you can absolutely peak twice a season. I've seen plenty of athletes, maybe they don't do it as well as they could, peak 3 times in a season. And given we're not talking about ultimate fitness 3 times, we're talking about bringing your fitness to a head, performing well for an event, seeing a downturn, and then bringing it up to a head again, repeating. Sometimes you can get away with that 3 times. I don't typically recommend it. I think that's a bit much. A couple times, though, is very reasonable, especially in the situation you're describing here. You've got at least 12 weeks, probably more like 14 weeks in between. That's plenty of time to to peak twice. One thing, probably the first thing to consider is the priority of your peaks. Again, you're not going to be ultimate fitness each time. So which of those two peaks is more important to you? Play your cards accordingly. A lot of riders, a lot of high-level riders peak for nationals, and then they go into a downturn, and then they peak for worlds sort of thing. So you can bet they're trying to bring a higher level of fitness to that second peak. And they train accordingly. If for instance, say you have a lot of stats to base this decision on, if you know that typically you hit 110 CTL, your training stress, you can ramp your training stress up to 110, and that's about where you perform your best. After that, you start to deteriorate. You just can't maintain a higher training load. So you would plan that for the more important peak.
6 weeks average training stress of 110.
Yes. Yep. Sorry to throw terms, acronyms. So, but if you have the data to say, I know how much training stress I can handle before things start to fall apart, then you're going to time things dependent upon that. If you don't, well, you kind of have to accumulate that. So there's quite a lot of trial and error that's going to go into it. One thing I will say is that base conditioning is always necessary. Yeah. If you only bring one thing to the table, to your event, obviously you're not going to be at peak fitness if you do this, but it's got to be your base fitness. After that, it's simply about building fitness. Whether or not you choose to specialize that fitness to further it a bit, to hone it, is up to you. But you could simply have good base fitness, build toward a peak, take a break, build again toward a peak, take a break, without ever really specializing. Might not lead you to your peak fitness, but it can allow you to peak multiple times in a year.
I like that approach too. When you think about, I want to really be fast in 4 years too. Right? Like you just build,
longer term
build.
picture for sure.
And I think of like your racing that you usually do in a year. It's road racing, mountain bike racing, cross racing, and possibly triathlon, right? Like you race year round. So and I guess we all do now.
And when you get multidiscipline like that, you have to, again, prioritize which peak matters the most, because you can't build four or five different types of fitness and have them all peak at just the right time. It's a pretty unrealistic approach.
Yeah, and I've actually found great success in this, in building up for, and it's not the peak, but building up and peaking the fitness that I currently have, and then resetting for that. I find that it builds up a lot of confidence too, as long as I do things properly and I stick to the plan. If I stick to the plan, then I can get to a point where I'll get out of base conditioning, and then I'll go into this race and I'll ramp things up a bit and specialize.
And if your season accommodates it, you can hit that first peak, and that's now your new base. You're going to come down a little bit because you're going to back things off a bit, allow your body to recover, allow your mind to reset. But then that's your new base. You're working upward from there. So that second peak should theoretically be higher. A lot of riders, however, plan a single peak, and then they find something later on that they try to re-peak for. Not going to be as high as a peak, but it can still be a relative peak.
For us, are you guys, because this is almost the exact May and August for our 40K TT and for Leadville. Is that going to be the two peaks for you guys too?
Yep.
It is for me,
yeah. Absolutely.
And then, maybe if I, for whatever reason, get the cyclocross bug again, I might try to bring it back up, but I know it's not going to be full-fledged peak.
And in the fall too, for TrainerRoad, we travel a ton, so it's going to work perfect, because after August, that's when travel starts. Kind of have a little downturn. That's really our off season, is the fall. And then we can pick it back up for cross.
Yeah, it's gonna be a hectic time. So really, if I can get those two peaks out of the way and up into August, after that, I'm ready to sail on whatever I got. So.
Yeah, but based on that, Connor, with your 12 to 14 week gap, that leaves enough time for at least a full 8-week build phase. What you do beyond that is up to you. It all depends on how much time you take off, how much fitness you lose. You might simply build toward that event, maybe a build and a half, or build and start 4 weeks of your specialty plan, maybe just build for 4 weeks and then do 8 weeks of a specialty plan. You have a lot of options. The point is, you don't need to repeat base. If you carried a lot of fitness into that first peak, all the base constituents are there, you're good. Move on to build and specialty combinations.
Let's get into Eric's question. He says, hey guys, love the podcast, 5 stars. He says, I'll follow Chad and Jonathan on Strava if you answer my question. He says, currently I only follow Nate because he's always asking for more followers.
Because he begs for it.
Yeah, it's true.
It's a marketing effort, guys.
That's how he rationalizes it,
He says, I just finished week 6 of the low volume half Ironman plan. That's one of our training plans. It's the specialty plan, the half Ironman plan. We have base and build plans too for each distance in triathlon, but he says, the workouts are challenging for me to start the week. I had to bail towards the end of Mills, and Mills is one of our workouts, and I had to cut Trey Mountain short as dad duties called. I get that now. I didn't really get that before. I really get that now. Dad duties messing up workouts. So he says, the workout was also very challenging, but I still felt good about my efforts. I'm also following your running program and swimming when I have time. I'm finding when I get to the weekend, I'm pretty beat. For example, this week I had to move Phoenix, which is another one of our workouts, to Sunday, and had to work out on Saturday, or because he had to work on Saturday. And even with the day off, I found I couldn't complete the workout. I probably could have carried on longer than 26 minutes, but it was feeling so difficult I figured I should cut my losses. This has happened to me in past weeks as well, so I've got a few questions. Number one, when I'm feeling this way at the end of the week, should I seek out a recovery ride instead of a prescribed workout?
Yeah, I mean, maybe this is something you there's always a certain level of trial and error involved. We are supposed to get increasingly fatigued as the week goes, working towards our eventual recovery day, assuming that recovery day is going to be enough, and that's kind of what draws the line. If your recovery day is enough, then you probably didn't do too much during the preceding week. But if you find that single recovery day doesn't get you into a productive place come Tuesday, well, it wasn't. So maybe taking one of those workouts, toning it down a bit, will leave you a little better off for the next week. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a balance. That's an endless trial and error process.
And are the plans, they're meant to be adjusted, right?
Yeah, they're always flexible.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things, I mean, the key workouts, the Tuesday, Thursday, the Saturday, try not to divert people away from those. But everything else is far more flexible than even those.
Yeah.
And those maintain their certain level of flexibility as well. But fatigue's part of the process. So you have to recognize when that fatigue's productive and when it's destructive, when it puts you in a place that it takes you too long to come back and you're costing yourself fitness in the process of recovery.
How do you figure that out?
Again, trial and error. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to hit the statistics and map your CTL and your ATL and all this technical stuff. It doesn't have to be that. Pay attention to, again, this is just as simple as what I just said. Did Monday get me to a point where Tuesday or Tuesday evening, and that's another fix, take that Tuesday morning, bumps to Tuesday night. It might just be a question of another 12 hours of recovery, given that it's not like this brutal work day that wipes you out even further. So you kind of have to play with it. And the sad fact of the matter is it's not going to be the same thing week to week to week. Mm-hmm. As you go through, week 1, it's easier to rally from. Week 2, a little tougher. Week 3, really tough. Then on top of it, what happened off the bike. So it's not always I could do this last week. Why can't I do it this week? Or this is week 1 and I got through week 3. Why can't I get through week 1? Well, maybe you had a really brutal day or a brutal couple of days, or the different types of workouts are taking a different different toll on you.
Yeah,
I've found that recently I've gotten good at this. Before, I used to be, Eric, just like you, all the time. And I look back on my old workouts.
Just grinding yourself down.
I'd get halfway through a workout, and then I'd either stop it or I'd turn it down and then finish it. And then the next workout would be turned down for the entire workout. Yeah. You know what I mean? Over and over and over.
That's like blindly following a plan because it's there.
Yeah.
Not trying to recognize the fact that this plan may not be an exact fit for me. And today, this time, sometimes maybe it works just perfectly.
That's a good point.
But when you get to a point where subsequent workouts or workouts in sequence are falling apart, that's a dead on tail.
Yeah. I've recently had a big improvement, and the key thing is being consistent. And what I've done is, when I feel like this, there's two sides of it. One is I'm always trying to work out, but 2, if I'm feeling bad, I'm making the really brutal ones easier, because I'd rather do or the really easy ones even easier too. I tone everything down and do more than go into a workout where I just know I'm setting myself up for failure. You know what I mean? That I'm not going to get through it. And then the next day I'm going to be behind. And the next day I'm going to be behind. That, and then tying in the nutrition to that together has been huge.
That's a whole other topic. And we got some questions where we'll elaborate on the nutrition aspect of it. But it does go back to, and I know I say this a lot, but the hard days are hard, easy days are easy. And less about the easy days. If you can't make your hard days hard, and I don't just mean you're suffering, I mean you can productively get through hard intervals, then the easy days aren't easy enough. Maybe they don't need to be even easy days. They need to be off the bike days.
And what I mean by that too, I might take, there's Mount Deborah +1, that's 10 intervals. And I'm like, I'm feeling horrible today. I'll go Mount Deborah, which is 7, right? And I'm like, I'm just going to go through the 7, right? Rather than all 10.
Sure.
It's a handy trick to be able to use that to look at the workout that you might be able to turn it down. I just want to, the one thing, because you guys have added on this, I feel it's solid and almost comprehensive. The only thing that I would add to this is keep track of variables in your life. And that's one thing that I think that you have to do. And I think a lot of people go through their life without keeping track of those necessarily. And that's key, because then you're able to also add that in and weigh that with, not only why am I feeling this way? Instead of just assuming that it might be fatigue, then you say, oh yeah, that was an extremely stressful day.
All the objective data and feedback we get from the bike workouts, that's all good and fine. That tells one part of the story. But the rest of it is what Jonathan's describing. So you do have to track that subjective stuff. If you're serious about this, all of it has to be looked at to some extent.
Yep, it's all stress on your body. Remember that. So, and ideally, you can reduce the rest of the stress. So you can just put training stress on your body. That would be great.
And one thing to add, you're going to have bad workouts. So the occasional bad workout is not cause for considering all the stuff we just described. It's a single bad day. It's when they happen in a string. When one leads to the next, and it's just a downward sort of trajectory. That's when you have to say something's not working.
Yep. His next question, can you talk a little bit more about RPE, which is rate of perceived exertion, for those that don't know? I'm starting to think that I'm working too hard on my runs, and I'm wondering if that is adding extra stress or too much stress to my body. I guess that we'll leave the additional info, and we can reference it if we need. But so RPE is something that we recommend as a way to... We've said, like, if you absolutely can't train with power, and let's just say, like, you're away from your power meter, your bike, anything else like that, you don't have a way to do it, RPE can be like a fallback plan on structuring your work. And it's a 1 to 10 scale usually. There are other ways to look at it. They have 1 to 22. They have plenty of different things.
20. Yeah, I hate that scale.
Yeah. It's heart rate tied, so it's
tricky,
we
right?
don't need to get
Let's
into
just
it.
say 1 to 10.
It makes it a little more complex.
Makes it easy, right?
Sure.
And the thing, and 1 to 10 usually you're somewhere around 7.5.
And we're talking about perceived exertion here. So rate of perceived exertion. So your perception of how it feels. How hard does it feel to you?
Yep. And a 7.5 is roughly around where you'd find threshold. Some people say it's 8. Some people say it's 7.
Sure.
Somewhere around there. So that should give you the context.
And it's our single defining metric for swim and run workouts. So we're not equipped to run with power just yet. Maybe ever, I don't know. And in swimming, good luck measuring. Swimming's all going to be.
And no one needs to email us in about Stride. We know that the Stride
we know it's out there. We're well aware.
We know running power meters are out there. They just haven't reached the ubiquity that we see with cycling power meters or anything else.
And it just so happens that RPE is a very useful metric, especially as your experience grows. But it is subjective. What's in the case of the runs, and we'll get to this in a little bit, what is an easy run for one runner is not necessarily an easy run for another. Some people, the idea of running 30 minutes is a grueling prospect. For others, that's a true recovery run. They can keep it so easy that it actually feels like recovery.
Just like cycling.
Yeah, totally. So you first have to get clear on what is actually easy for me. And while I may describe an RPE 4 workout as marathon pace, maybe you never run a marathon. You don't know what marathon pace is. So you kind of have to determine, if I'm going to go out and run for 3 hours, what's roughly the pace I think I can maintain. Marathon so there's got to be some fine tuning in here. And there is a little, just a little spreadsheet cut out that describes what all these are, tries to relate them to running paces. If you've done these events, if you know what your 10K pace is, then boom, you know what a 7 RPE is. You need to be somewhere in that area. So that's all nuts and bolts. Figure out what these things are for you. And then basically you just have to recognize what we were describing. When it's too hard of a workout, we're not targeting what we're after. And it could be as simple as hampering your next workout. So if something is described as an easy run, but that run makes you so tired that you carry a ton of fatigue into the next workout, which is supposed to be a difficult, productive workout, that was too hard a pace.
I found that I used to use my, what are they called? The Ventilatory
thresholds. Those are useful.
Yeah, right.
Sure.
So we talked about those a long time ago, but I could tie that with my running. And I felt like that level 2 would be threshold and above.
And it is. So really quickly, ventilatory thresholds, there's 1 and 2. So VT1, VT2, and they correspond closely with LT1 and LT2. So your lactate thresholds. And the first one basically comes when breathing becomes noticeably labored. And I'm not talking like you're breathing hard, but now you're conscious of your breathing. You can no longer speak in full sentences. Now you're speaking in 3 or 4 words at a time sort of stuff. So now breathing is actually on your mind. It's not something that was just happening subconsciously prior.
So I'm going to try to tap this out. I tied it to my foot steps, like 90 RPM. So at threshold, it'd be like my in, out, in, out, in, out. And then below that would be 3. So in, out, in,
Yeah.
That's
out.
a music major
Yep.
right there.
And
Got
then,
good rhythm.
and then recovery would be in, out,
Yeah.
in,
Easy stuff.
out.
Yeah.
Hopefully that's not super loud on the podcast, but that when you tie that to, and runners totally do this. They tie their breathing to it, and
Yeah.
there's this pace level where you switch.
Yeah.
You start breathing harder, and if now that you're aware of it, you go out on a run and you think about that, you'll totally be aware, and that's another good, I think, RPE level.
And that ragged switch that you're talking about there, that's when you hit that LT2 VT2. That's the point. That's basically FTP, max lactate steady state, where we get to that point where any harder and we're going to have to back off. So that's it. If you want to tie your breathing to it, that's an excellent way to do it. Tie your breathing rate to your stride rate.
Yeah,
Another
that's an
thing,
interesting one.
if it's the easy runs, you should be able to talk.
Have a
right?
full conversation.
Yeah, you can talk to yourself. I was joking before, you could do the Pledge of Allegiance or whatever country you're at.
Yeah.
Probably not read a whole book the whole time, but 2 sentences, talk back and forth.
Full sentences.
Else.
Yeah, if you can speak in full sentences, you're probably in the neighborhood of recovery.
Yeah.
Where if you're at that
level.
V2 level, there's no chance.
Yeah.
My wife, she just did a duathlon. She comes through the first 2 miles, and I gripe at her. She's not running hard enough because she's like, "Hi guys, I love you. You're doing so well." And you see everyone else is like,
Yeah, the only running race I've ever done, I don't think that there was, I don't know if we could even measure what that ventilatory threshold was. It was like
it was a lot.
pukey zombie face. It was really bad.
You were VO2 max.
So, yeah, running's hard. Mark's question, he says, "Hello guys, first of all, love the podcast and app, 5 stars all around. I joined TR after I finally plucked up the courage to join my local club." And he says, all of whom are subscribed to TrainerRoad. Nice. They sound like good people.
Yes, very good.
He says, with your training and the support of my team, I've started racing. I was lucky enough to win a Cat 4 crit and leveled up to Cat 3. Nice job, man.
Mark, if you'd like to work for TrainerRoad to beat Pete Morris,
We're hiring.
He says, I'm enjoying my cycling more than ever. Thanks, guys. He says, due to a fear of damaging the bike and trainer, I don't practice out of the saddle drills on the trainer. So I assume this is the cause of this. My question, given that I will continue to have limited outdoor time in the coming months due to fatherhood, is there anything that can be done off the bike to try to strengthen the muscles in question? I'm getting worried for the race season. Thanks in advance.
Yeah, I'm going to start with this. I had the same fear with my first carbon bike back in 2007, and I started pulling everyone I could. Now that we have this semi-large training company, I have never once heard of anyone damaging a carbon bike on a trainer from out of the saddle.
Yep.
Like maybe sprinting, I'm going to take that out, but just like getting on the saddle and doing your intervals, not a one.
Yep.
Yeah,
and
if your
I'm
frame's that fragile. It's
You
I'm
probably
sure-
don't want to ride
bigger
it.
concerns. Yeah.
I'm sure there's somebody scrambling to write in about somebody that they heard about, and I've heard of things too, but I've never actually met a person that's done it. And we've met or had conversations with a lot of people that train
And
indoors.
maybe there's, a 2,000 watt sprint. We don't advise sprinting all out sprinting. I'm going to try to hit 1,500 watts.
No, clearly not.
But out of the saddle, switching in and out, never
Should be
heard.
able to do that seamlessly. And I think Sweet Spot 1 certainly, maybe both the Sweet Spot base plans have a whole lot of climbing drills that teach you how to kind of ease into this very thing, whether it's riding close to the saddle or just riding light on the saddle. Or there are drills that are aimed at helping you become more comfortable out of the saddle. But the fact is, and we're getting to this, is that you have to practice. Do you plan to do this outdoors? Well, you certainly got to be able to do it in practice.
And it's not a lot of torque on the frame. You
not.
shouldn't be, when you get from in the saddle to out of the saddle, it shouldn't be this huge amount of torque, right? It should be fluid.
Should be
Think of Contador.
Yeah, something that I would say with this too is if you are practicing standing on the bike on the trainer, I feel like you develop a better technique outside because your bike is fixed. So you're very keenly aware of your excessive movement that you have. It doesn't mean that you need to be straight up and down when you pedal and not move. That's not the point. But I think that I see a lot of people waste a lot of energy when they get out of the saddle when they're standing, and they end up wagging the bike excessively, or they end up throwing their body weight excessively from one side to the next, or very common I see is they lean really far forward over the front.
And there are times where the fatigue is so high that getting out of of the saddle probably doesn't make sense. I mean, it's already a hard enough interval, and then you're going to stand and basically recruit more muscle, which requires more oxygen, is going to put you in an even deeper hole than you're already in.
Yeah.
So I get that. But as far as the lower intensity stuff, even as high as maybe sweet spot, and threshold repeats for that matter, you should be able to work in and out of the saddle without certainly not harming your bike and without completely crippling your effort.
Yeah. So you mentioned Brandon Need earlier, one of our product managers here at TrainerRoad. He's an incredible climber. Incredible. But he's working on climbing specifically. That's a main thing that he wants to target. He wants to be the type of person that wins races on climbs. And he likes to spend some time out of the saddle. I talked to him, and he spends a lot of time out of the saddle on the trainer, as much as like 30%. And he has a very light and fragile Trek Amonda, right? Like a very light bike. It's not like he's riding some steel thing. His bike's just fine. There's no problems with it. He isn't, like we said, practicing sprints or anything like that. But the reason that I share this is we did that hill climb time trial, and he was out of the saddle for a lot of that, he said. And I was in the saddle for the majority because I'm training for that 40K TT, right? So it's I don't want to spend a whole lot of time out of the saddle right now because on that TT, if I get out of the saddle.
And most people are most people are more powerful over the longer term when they stay seated. That's just how it is. It's more taxing to stand. And you have to be very fluid, very efficient. Helps to be light, helps to be powerful.
You're more efficient aerodynamically efficient when you're in the saddle as well. And if you're moving at a decent rate of speed, that will have an effect. So there's plenty of reasons to say stay in the saddle as much as you can. But that said, if you've managed to become efficient that way, and you're dealing with certain things that are, for example, like really steep sections. We had switchbacks on that one. Yep. And in certain switchbacks, you can either sit down and grind, and it can put a lot of stress on those muscles. But if you stand up really quick, it can allow you to kind of get up that without excessively stressing those muscles in the same way that they were being used, and then get right back into it.
And this is another argument for off the bike strength training. I mean, this is the whole strong body is better at doing most things, and that includes working in and out of the saddle. Standing out of the saddle, if you have poor hip control, if it's poor joint control in general, but especially in the hips and low back, it's not going to magically clear itself up when you're standing on a bike. So if you struggle with balance in a general sense, it's certainly going to be harder on a bike. Stronger body.
Particularly point out the benefit of having a strong trunk, as you say, not core, but a strong trunk in that case, because once again, I see so many people when they get out of the saddle that all their weight shifts to their hands and hardly any is on their legs.
And that's what I'm talking about. When you say trunk, I basically mean the midsection. Yep. So we're talking the abdominals, the hips.
It allows you to maintain more balance, more central over the bike. And I know that you're thinking, like, I want to get forward off my legs because I've been sitting for a while, so I want to stand and get forward and put some of that weight off my legs. But really what you're doing is, in most cases, you're just really taxing certain muscle groups that way. If you can stay centered over that bike, you can be much more efficient. You can balance the load out a little more.
When you stand, you can enjoy a greater range of hip extension. So you're taking overloaded quads standing, and if you do it right, shifting some of that stress back onto your glutes and hamstrings. Yep. So actually move the stress from the obvious, already fatigued muscles back to the ones that don't get a whole lot of action.
Yes, that's why I do it. The quads are burning. I stand up for a little bit, and then John, your point is the weight's through the bottom bracket, like mountain biking, not. I shouldn't be like putting all the weight on my handlebars.
Yeah. If you feel like, whoa, like off balance, chances are when you get out of the saddle, what I see most people in that situation, the reason they're off balance is because all their weight is on the handlebars, and you're basically trying to ride a unicycle.
And that's one of the a lot of the drills address that very thing. People pitch their weight forward, and I mean the pedals drive the bike. Your hands don't do anything but hold you up. So keep your weight where it's meaningful.
Or the other one that you talked about, where if you're not just quads burning, but it's just so steep that you're going to be at like
sometimes
60.
You have to. Yeah.
You don't, so then it's easier to ride 60 RPM or 50 RPM out of the saddle than in the saddle.
Yeah, and another thing that I would add to this is when you get into mixed surface, it's extremely important. You'll be very keenly aware of your deficiencies in standing out of the saddle if you're riding on gravel, because you lean forward and you do that, you're going to lose traction and you're going to slide. So you really have to be I guess, well trained with that.
I had a whole year with my last Yeti. I didn't get out of the saddle once on a mountain bike race because I felt so misbalanced, like I was going to fall over. Yep. We've gotten better and we've done a lot of training. You guys have all heard of it. Yep. Now during the race, all the time,
Yeah.
Like, especially
In and
if it's
out.
Well, and
too-
see that-
in and out, right?
Yep.
And that's where it comes to the whole, we put down specificity versus versatility. I mean, if you're a 40K TT and that's all you're going to do, the only time you're going to stand is maybe at a turnaround or occasionally to stretch. Maybe you don't need to work on this. But if you're a mountain biker, you better be able to get in and out of the saddle.
Yeah.
I won't say effortlessly. It's always going to be effort, but seamlessly, fluidly,
Yep.
frequently.
And then there's this higher level on mountain biking than road where you really, if you go too far forward, your rear wheel slips.
Yes.
And on a climb, and you have to unclip.
Oh, it's
and then,
terrible.
It's a
Yep.
mess.
And then you can't. Usually, it's so steep you can't start. So you got to run your bike up, and then everyone passes you, and
Crazy loss of.
and you go sorry, because you just stopped a whole bunch of people.
And you're exhausted too.
Yep.
It's a good way to mess that up. So if you want to refine your standing, one thing that I can recommend is your standing pedaling or out of the saddle pedaling. Try to go ride on gravel or something like that, like a mixed surface that's going to tell you if you are centered right on that bike and being efficient.
That's helpful. I'd take it a step further back than that, though, and first address strength conditioning. I mean,
Yes.
again, if you're not balanced on the ground, walking, standing on one leg, doing exercises, single leg exercises, unilateral exercises especially,
Yep.
I'd first focus on that and then expect that will carry really nicely to getting out of the saddle on the bike.
How does one know when they're strong enough? Because there's an upper limit,
That's a good
right?
question.
You're not going to be.
And no distinct line, but I mean, if you get out of the saddle and you're just all over the place, chances are your hips just aren't very good at doing their jobs.
Yeah.
There's probably nothing that's helping you externally rotate your legs, stabilize, because if your hips aren't stable, that carries everywhere else.
Yep.
Up the chain, down the chain, you have to start there.
One thing for my upper body strength for mountain biking, I talked about being tired. Now I think that I'm good enough at the moment because my upper body is not tired at all.
It's not a limiter.
It's not a limiter, exactly. I think maybe that's what you're talking about too, out of the saddle climbing, is if
Sure.
that's a limiter and you're all over the place.
That's part of it, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to have a strong upper body, but you have to have a capable one.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be meaty, but it
Yeah.
has
Yeah.
to be strong.
It doesn't have to be like yours.
Just, you know what I mean.
strong as you
I hope you're...
You're looking to be stable. Like that's what you're really hoping
Yeah,
for.
you
is
can be
stable and
bantamweight. You can be thin as can be, but if you've got strength where you need it, which is basically in your shoulder capsules and through your shoulder blades and down through your trunk and your hips, then you're good to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Standing isn't bad. It just needs to be used wisely, right? So, Mitch, he says, how can I help open up my hips and reverse my anterior pelvic tilt?
Wait, what does that mean?
Let's discuss
So
that.
if your pelvis is a bowl of water and holds water when it's level, if you tilt anteriorly or forward, it tips over the front.
So we're talking
onto
about
your thighs.
a person that's folded forward pretty harshly
Yeah, and
over
typically
that saddle.
when the pelvis tips forward, the low back arches, and it leads to just a low back, an excessive low back kyphosis. So too much of a low back curve.
Okay. So, and we're talking a curve in the opposite direction of somebody that would be posterior pelvic tilt, rolling it slightly backward, perhaps.
Yeah, which is not super common. I mean, most of us, we'll get to what causes this.
I see most people have a problem with anterior pelvic tilt. It's pretty
Most
common.
people do, yeah.
They're kind of folded. It's almost like instead of where their sit bones are anchored on the saddle, and I know that I'm using my hands right now on the podcast, but bear with me. If your pelvis is anchored on that saddle and then your back isn't just like a straight line back up to your shoulders. It's got a bit of a bend to it where it's arched backward a bit, kind of like a cat stretch a bit. Yeah. You'll see like riders that don't have this issue will look like that versus riders that do have this issue will be more of a straight line.
Yeah, it's most riders, frankly. I mean, people who are desk bound, who drive, who sit at tables to eat, etc. Yeah, we all fixed our posture just there. But it comes down to two things. It comes down to long muscles, which are typically weak, and short muscles, which are typically too tight.
Yep.
And that's what you need to address here, Mitch, is that your hamstrings, your glutes, your butt, and your hip flexors, so right at the crease of the thighs and your abdomen, those muscles are all short because that's how we spend most of our time. That's how we spend our time on the bike too. So those muscles need to be strengthened, and that could be it, but there has to be a balance aspect to it. So when those muscles are tight, when those muscles are long and weak, other muscles are tight and short. And in this case, typically it has to do with our low abdominals and then our erector spinae. I never say that right. But either way, the muscles that extend the spine in general, but in this case, the low spine especially. And because of this is why we did the stretching and the strengthening videos, was to address basically all these postural distortions that happen because we spend so much time in this seated, closed position.
Yeah. I think that it's something that I recognize if I take time off the bike and I get back on the bike, I recognize that I have more, my pelvis wants to tilt forward more. If I haven't been doing the strength training, if I haven't been doing the stretching that I need to do or anything else like that, then I find that I fold into that position. Well, I usually get more tension in my back, more pain in my back.
Yeah, and see, first off, we reinforce that forward tilt when we try to get into any aero position. Most of the time, we don't have the strength to hold our sit bones down on the saddle, so what do we do but roll forward under our pubic bone, maintaining that forward pelvic tilt, because we just don't have too much tension in the places that want to pull it, and not enough strength in the places that should stabilize it. So that compounds the issue.
Yeah, I've seen that with a lot of people. Like, you know, they're in a decent position, then as soon as they get to the drops or the race gets hard or they want to get aero, it's like boom, and they just like roll forward,
teetering on soft tissue at that point. And
you spend a lot of time there, and your back's gonna be killing you later on.
Yeah,
right?
and that's so these muscles that we're talking about in particular, certainly the quads as they get tighter, but your hip flexors as they get tighter, they insert or originate, I guess, on your lumbar spine. So that's why you're feeling that low back pain. So when these muscles get shorter and shorter, they're pulling more and more on that low back as you stay in this closed position. So that's why we have to stress the low back or address the low back just as much as we address lengthening the actual short hip flexor muscles.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I used to see this more frequently, and I've seen it less frequently. It's a very informal observation of mine, but in cross-country World Cup racing, it used to be like every lap you'd see the guys like stretching their back. And I see it less and less now. And I wonder if it's because more of them are on full suspension bikes. Perhaps these full suspension bikes also, these bikes have a little bit more of a slack head tube angle now.
See, it's not something we're ever going to get away from because we're in that position for a long time. So things are going to get bound up. So it does make sense that at some point they try to add a bit of flexibility into their riding.
Maybe it's because they're strength training more, because that's definitely becoming more prominent.
Probably part of it, yeah.
But yeah, I'm seeing less of it.
This is going to be huge for Leadville for us. Right, like
massive, 8 hours,
and it's hard to replicate because we've talked about it before, and I don't think any of us. You keep saying 8. I'm going to say 9, but
it's a better bet.
Yeah, exactly. At least for Chad and I. No, it's hard to replicate that, and I don't think we should replicate that. But I think we should all be doing a little bit extra strength training.
Oh yeah,
for that race, because obviously I'm doing these 90-minute mountain bike races right now, and I can't say that I have enough strength to last
8 hours.
9 hours.
9 hours.
Well,
and I'm going to keep saying 8.
The hip flexors particularly, Mitch, are kind of difficult to work with because you see the couch stretch, you see the quad stretch, and so much of the time your quads are so tight that you can never stretch those deep hip muscles anyway. So you have to go to greater lengths to actually get those deep muscles. I mean, considering where they originate, where they insert, they're deep. You're not just gonna. I mean, you can feel part of your hip flexor when you flex it, but to get all of it, you have to dig around in your gut a bit. You have to put great pressure on the flexor. It's on the flexors themselves. I mean, it's not an easy get. It's not just to try this stretch, do it every day, and you'll be good to go.
Even when you go and get a massage from a skilled PT,
temporary relief at best.
When they go in there, you'll recognize how deep this is. I mean, a lot of the time they're working through your lower abdomen down there to try to get to these things, to try to get them relaxed.
But then we go and reverse all of that when we get back on the bike.
Yeah.
So unless that's something that's a regular part of your day or week, is regular massage sessions, which for most of us is not.
Yeah.
You have to be able to figure out how to do this on your own.
Yeah, and my point with that is that it just backing up what you're saying about how difficult it is to get to that. I see a lot of people think like, well, I stretch I do like, you said the couch stretch or anything else like that.
Useful,
I roll a bit and I'm good, but I've found that it's really tough to get in there. I can't use like a broad ball. Like if you're trying to massage there, because a broad one just isn't pointed enough, and you have to get into really specific areas that are pretty small around your pelvis.
Yeah, so we're talking about the iliopsoas, which is the iliacus and the psoas major. Deep muscles. The best way I've found personally to get them is to use a lacrosse ball or a little trigger point ball. Find the muscle, which is a process in and of itself. But once you find it, place the ball in it. Take something as heavy as like a 40, 50-pound kettleball. Set that on the ball and actually smash that muscle. It's not it's not an easy get, and it's pretty painful, I gotta say, at first, but over time, every time I do it, it's a little less painful, which tells me this is going to carry for longer and longer durations when I get on the bike.
Yeah, one thing that I try to do, and I don't know if this really helps a bit, but after a ride, and I've talked about this I think before on the podcast, but I lay down usually on my back on the edge of our bed, and so that my legs are hanging over. And then I put a foam roller actually lengthwise up my spine, and I just kind of try to reverse that position that I'm in on the bike.
Sure.
And I found that if I can spend 5 minutes like that after I work out or anything else like that, that it really does. I notice a difference in that at least in time to that tension becoming a problem, right? Like it extends that a bit, if anything. So just trying to reverse that hunched over, crunched up position that we're always in.
This stuff's so important. The tight psoas, which is like, it's kind of like in your
in
belly.
there.
Well, just think of your lumbar spine, so belly button, navel-ish region, all the way down to the top of your femur. It runs that whole length.
When I had my lower back pain before, the massage therapist, he's a sports massage therapist, doing it forever, he thought that I originally had that pain because of a really tight hip flexor and psoas. Yeah. And oftentimes in the injury, it's the opposite side that causes it, of being like too tight,
right?
And the other side overworks.
Yeah, it pulls your pelvis off kilter.
Yeah. Also, when I would for triathlon running and high intensities, I'd get like you call it a side ache. But really what I was experiencing was like a tightening up psoas that was so tight.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that was because I'd be on the bike and I'd hammer in this TT position, which is extremely collapsed, right? Like knees touching my chest.
Sure.
You're folded.
And then I would unfold and say, work at 100% of your effort right now, right? And then it would slow me down so many times. And I had this whole, my other point with that is, if you do see a sports masseuse or a PT, try to say, what can I do to do this at home? Because I don't think anyone has the time or money.
You have to be able to do it every day, basically.
Yep. And I was releasing my psoas, and it would help, but I haven't been doing it. And
well, you know what?
Thanks for bringing it up, because I should do it.
What compounds this whole issue is that if you have any sort of imbalance, so maybe hamstrings on the left leg are a little tighter on the right side, what that does to your pelvis, what that does to your quads, what that does to all the other opposing muscles, yet another wrench in the gears.
Which I think we all are imbalanced to some certain degree.
Oh, we absolutely are. Yeah.
So it's
keeping,
not like
keeping your
you're
pelvis
not unique. If and the reason I bring that up is a lot of people go to the PT and they'll say like, I have a muscular imbalance. It's like, welcome to the club. Like we all do. None of us are perfectly balanced. Yeah. So that's really common to have. And yeah, it can throw things haywire. And trying to get those things fixed beforehand is key, or as often as possible. So. With that, guys, that covers it for this week. Or unless you have something else to
I have
add?
one quick mention.
Cool.
I didn't do the cherry pie crit just because I talked to both pro teams. That was a crit I was going to do on Monday. They both said it was technical and crashy. And I had an 800 TSS week. And I was just like, even just with that, I was like, oh. I was
begging for another broken collarbone.
Exactly. I was going to try to go off the front immediately. And then if they caught me, I was just going to go in my truck and drive home.
Yeah.
But with the 800 TSS week and the technical nature of it, I was like, you're not going to be able to do that. So I didn't want to sit in a crashy field for
big week and a couple big days just prior to it.
Yeah, like 500 TSS for the 2 days prior.
You made the right call.
Yeah, thank you, Chad.
Reinforcing the two things that we talked about, the one thing this week, one last week. This week is recognizing when it's too much is too much. And then the other thing is picking the right races that would hit it, the proper level to allow you to grow.
I had a great conversation with Ben Jacques Maines at lunch. So he's worn the leader's jersey in the Tour of California.
Yeah, legit dude.
He hopefully is going to be on our podcast at Sea Otter. Right. He is amazing. I talked to a lot of interesting people, and I was just sitting there like, please keep talking. He's got strong opinions on like eating disorders for pros and other cyclists.
Smart guy.
Stuff on Strava.
Super smart.
Talking about the difference between, workouts having purpose versus Strava. Strava's fun. We all like Strava. But when you have a purpose for a workout, do the purpose of the workout. Don't just try to jam up the hill. And, and so many things that he talked about, and then race tactics. And one thing he said is, I wouldn't do races unless it was my strength. Why would I go to a race when it's not my strength? Yeah. When I do all this training, I just pick. There's plenty of races. I pick the races for my strength.
Yeah, we need to get him. He'd be an excellent, excellent guest.
Excellent.
Cool. So thanks everybody for joining us on the live stream and for the podcast as well. If you're still with us on the live stream, stay tuned and we'll answer some of the questions that you guys have submitted throughout this podcast. Once again, remember you can submit your questions at trainerroad.com/podcast, and we'll talk to you all next week.
Thanks everybody.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Let's see if I can do this on my iPad.
Live stream time.
Dun, dun, dun.
It looked like the live stream might have cut out for a bit. Hopefully it didn't cause any issues for anybody. There we are. Okay.
Ooh, it's formatted all pretty.
Okay. Amit, I hope that's how you say it. I apologize if it's not. Says, any opinions on using a fat bike to train outside on the Sunday prescribed ride? Mid-volume sweet spot base plan. And he says keeping in mind what's prescribed, mid-volume squeeze on base 2, I think. He says he's getting ready for True Grit Epic. That's a 50-mile mountain bike race down there in St. George, and Alberta, Canada is cold and snowy this time of year. Nate, I've only ridden fat bikes a couple times, but you've ridden it more than I have.
Yeah.
It's just as viable as using anything else, right?
Just a bunch of fun.
Yeah, tons
Bunch of slow fun.
Yeah.
Slow, heavy fun.
Don't go through any rock gardens because it's not very good on those. I've had a good crash.
I think Nate found the resonant frequency of fat bike tires in a rock garden. It was pretty
I
funny.
wish we had footage of that.
It launched me.
Yeah. But I think that it's a good option. Just if you can't, just make sure that if you've ridden these trails at other times, make sure that you're not trying to keep pace with that because fat bikes are slower. That's just the way it goes. A lot of rotating mass, big tread, everything else. So make sure that if you don't have a power meter, use RPE to the best of your ability to try to make sure that you're hitting your marks.
Alex asks, you talked about the 6-week average of 110 for training stress. What would be like a pro versus average person?
Yeah, so I didn't mean to make that sound like an easy get. 110 training stress, 6-week average training stress is big. It's very big. So you have to be, I don't know, that'd probably put you high Cat 3, low Cat 2 sort of territory, maybe Cat 1.
Cat 1. That's so to give everyone an idea. That means every day your workouts are 110 training stress on average.
On average. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you have to do some bigger days to be able to have rest days.
You can do it in a number of ways. So it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be Cat 1 fit. But so like you take a pro tour level rider, and you're looking at 140 up to 160. Some of these guys can push it, temporarily 170, 180, but that's rare, and that's superhuman, really. So if you pro tour level, let's say 140, 150, then down to domestic pro or even international pro, 130, 120. But either way, 110 CTL, that's a very big training load.
So what I'm doing right now is about 70. And 70, I feel, is like a really good spot to keep improving.
And if you've listened, Nate's doing a lot of work.
Yeah,
so it's not
that's
not
training.
an easy get. Yeah.
I am not doing 70.
And 80 I feel is too much for me right now.
Okay.
And 80, I've touched 80 like maybe only once, and then I got sick. But maybe two I was going to get sick no matter what. But to give other people context, 70 is around I think 450 average a week, which is like mid-volume.
And be clear too, you can get 110 6-week training stress average in a number of ways. So if you're doing it by doing 4 and 5 hour rides on a frequent basis over the course of a week, it's not going to take the same toll as what we're doing indoors with a lot of intensity, and very little time off, a lot of structure, etc. So an 80 stress load over 6 weeks. Indoors versus outdoors, apples and oranges. They're a bit different.
Jan or Jan, I'm not sure how you pronounce it. Either way, says, thank you for answering my question on when to calibrate a Kurt Kinetic road machine last week. My follow-up is concerning the ramp test, which I love, by the way. He says, how do I fit the calibration in the short warm-up? I know extending the warm-up is a big no-no, but working with only virtual power, I want to make sure I am working with correct numbers as I enter the build phase. It'd be just fine. Would it be a problem if they were to lightly spin for a while to get that trainer heated up to do a spin-down calibration before they start the workout? Would that be a problem for the ramp test? I don't think it would be, right? If they were to spin lightly beforehand for a while.
That's a good question. Yeah, and I think it's kind of a necessary step too. So.
Yeah, I would, and I personally prefer a little bit more of a warm-up. So no problem at all. Just load up a free ride and spin for a bit if you want, or something else like that, and then calibrate thereafter. He then says, concerning RPE for running workouts, if one workout calls for RPE 8 for 30 minutes, and another one calls for RPE 8 for 1 minute, are these workouts run at the same pace, or rather perceived exertion for the duration of the workout?
Yeah, I can't imagine any workout I'd prescribe at a RPE 8 for 30 minutes. Maybe a cumulative 30
perhaps
minutes.
It's just a principle that he's trying to, or perhaps he's just using that for the sake of the I guess, displaying this one for us. Like, I think that what you're getting at, if I'm correct here, Jan or Jan, is that, RPE 8 is RPE 8, regardless of the duration.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not as if it's RPE 8 for that duration. It's RPE 8 is RPE 8.
Yeah, no.
Regardless of when it
the RPEs are going to be tied to what the intended intensity is. So theoretically, you could not run at an RPE 8 for 30 minutes.
Yep. So it stays at RPE 8.
And different people do that differently.
Yeah, absolutely.
Somebody asks, where do I learn about race tactics?
Oh.
Listen back to all the Cliff Bar episodes we've done. They are, I think, the best resource we've had. Like, I haven't found another resource online that's as good.
Yeah, neither have I.
There's a book called The Rider, which is the way that he writes it is a little bit hard to follow because it goes like back in time and but it's still you can still get some good stuff from The Rider.
I think there's a book called Reading the Race. It's very rudimentary, but it works. And if you're new to race strategy and tactics, it's a good place to start.
Yeah, and I think honestly, those episode 21 is the first Cliff Bar podcast we did with them. Then if you just Google TrainerRoad podcast Cliff Bar, you'll see everyone that we've done with them. That's probably the easiest way to find it. But something that I would say too is I've learned a lot from tactics in speaking with other riders. Like, for example, but you have to make sure that those riders know what they're doing because everyone has an opinion on tactics, but they don't necessarily know. So, for example, I really pay attention to what Chad says about tactics. I don't pay attention to the guy that always takes flyers and then gets caught. I don't really want to talk to that guy. But when I observe specific riders very carefully and I listen to everything that they say, even offhand comments that are just thrown out lightly, I can learn and pick up a lot from those comments. So that's how I built a lot of my knowledge before when I was just starting racing.
Yeah, race and listen to racers, the successful ones. The ones
and Pete told us that after he beats us at each crit, he will sit down with us and tell us all the things we did wrong.
Thanks,
Pete.
But I mean, either way, I'm more excited for a learning experience because if we do beat Pete, then we can say what we did.
Yep.
And if Pete does beat us,
then
we really do need to listen to him, right?
Well, and we can also
we messed up.
Yeah, that's an awesome learning opportunity.
We can show what we did wrong for folks, and then they can.
Yeah, seriously, if we do something wrong, he explains what that thing is.
If Pete beats us, I feel like we did something wrong, right?
Well,
so we should, because it's
6 versus 1. Yeah, that's a safe bet.
Of fit, we're gonna have 3 pros and us 3. And we're not too shabby.
We'll do.
Yeah.
We'll do. We should recruit producer Bryce too.
No, Bryce is on the team.
No, Bryce is he's our producer for the podcast. He's a pro mountain biker, enduro rider.
Wins pro enduros.
He's extremely fit.
Very similar power profile to crit racing.
Yes.
Enduros.
Yeah.
Right? He's just on really hard, great technical skills. We're going to upgrade Bryce's bike.
Yeah.
I give you special tires too. We'll get you nice tires. What else could we?
We
Bryce
will wax your chain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'll wax your chain.
They will.
Bryce is about 335 FTP. Yep, 335. What's your weight, Bryce?
It's 175.
175, 335. So right around 4.2 watts per kilo. But I feel, and Jonathan feels like 2. Bryce races at this beast mode.
Yes, he goes into beast mode when the flag drops.
That is much. He will not let somebody beat him.
Nope.
That is so much higher than what his actual, kind of like how Pete does. I think he's got a really extreme anaerobic work capacity.
Yeah.
Pete doesn't know about Bryce yet. So we've got a little dark horse.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't matter. What are you going to do? What are you going to do?
No, I'm not trying to hide anything.
At one point, a comment was put out about me being afraid to ride in the gutter, which is absurd. Riding mountain bikes, I think I'm okay with riding in the gutter. But he also questioned if Bryce is willing to do that. And I said, Bryce would be willing to ride across the Grand Canyon on a tightrope at 800
bunny hop
watts.
up onto the curb, ride past Pete, and then jump back in front of him.
Bryce literally, for Carson City off-road, we're going 30 on the road, 30 miles per hour. I'm holding on, covering the brakes. Bryce comes by. He does a manual on he bunny hops onto the curb going 30, doesn't land on both tires, manuals down, and then goes back off it was nothing.
He's
got skills.
He's got some skills, yeah.
Okay, so Greg Dewman. Greg, email me and tell me how to say your last name because every time I talk about you, you're just Greg D, which I can't say it. I don't know how to say it. What do you suggest doing first? Extend the time of an interval, 8-minute sweet spot to 10-minute sweet spot, or add another interval, 3 8-minute sweet spots to 4 8-minute sweet spots. Intervals and why. This is kind of a coaching approach. Choose your poison. I know Hunter Allen doesn't really consider anything less than 10 minutes a true muscle endurance effort. Mm-hmm. I see things differently. I think that anytime you grow your capacity, whichever way gets you there is the way to go. So I like more shorter intervals. I think they're less fatiguing. I think you can rally and do more work over the course of a workout when you break it down into smaller bits. I do think those smaller bits need to become longer bits as you move towards your events, if your events are going to require you to dole out long periods of muscle endurance sort of work. But I like the greater frequency of shorter efforts a lot more.
And I think it's all part of the progression. So
it is.
If you do, let's say you're doing 50 minutes of sweet spot, shorter efforts, and then as a progression on top of that, before extending past 15 minutes,
Yeah, absolutely.
you do those 50 minutes with longer intervals,
Which is
less breaks.
Exactly what I'm doing right now.
Yep.
And it's just think of it as a 3x20 workout. If you do a single 20-minute effort and it just buries you and you still have 2 more 20 efforts to do, that's a pretty wasted workout. But if you do 4 5-minute repeats, 5 4-minute repeats, which is short little 30-second breaks, but you can get through the whole workout, far more productive workout.
Yep. And then you can work up.
Totally.
Right.
Exactly. Then you start to bridge them. Then you start to make those 30-second breaks, 20-second breaks, or you start to make those 5-minute intervals, 8-minute stretches, a couple 8s and a 4 sort of thing.
And it helps so much to do that in the progression for like adding a little bit of stress.
It's way more motivating.
You'll get less of those like workouts that you just can't finish.
When you take when you take a 4x8 minute or say a 4x6 and grow it to a 5x6 last week or last workout, you know you did 4 of these. I can do a 5th one. But when you look at a 3x20 growing to even a 3x25 and you think that 20-minute crushed me and now I've got to add 5 more minutes onto that. So really just figure out what works best for you. I personally am a fan of the shorter, more frequent stuff.
Chad, I did 3x30 sweet spot yesterday.
Yeah, it's awesome and it's
Attaboy.
working for you. You know, me,
TT.
that would just make me not want to ride my bike anymore.
No,
He says,
but I worked up to it. That's the point. I didn't jump into
Sure.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Paul says, "Hi guys, I have a question about nutrition after an evening workout," and he says after 8 p.m. Should I refuel right after, even when we're talking about 1,200 kilocalories that he burned during that workout, or do it the next day?
Which
This is in a different spot
down
here.
about,
so,
I have a
yep,
question about nutrition.
on
Okay.
YouTube. Yeah, so I have a question about nutrition after an evening workout.
Right after.
So is it better to do it after, or
I would base that largely on the intensity of the workout. If it's high intensity, cortisol is just coursing through your system and doing all sorts of bad things that will potentially negate all the training benefit you derive from that workout. Absolutely eat. If it was a low-end intensity workout, 1,200 calories is quite a lot, but if you kept the intensity low, I mean like 60%, 65%, that's very different in nature to the stress response it elicits from your body. So, you know, you can do those lighter intensity fat burners and go to bed on, you know, little or nothing. I don't know. I'd recommend that exactly. Maybe some greens and some lean protein sort of thing would be a better way to go. But if you do, you know, 1,200 calories worth of VO2 max repeats, that's absolutely the worst state you could go to bed in.
I personally just, because I would think about the next workout too.
And that's a concern too.
And if it was an easy day, probably the next day I'm going to be doing,
hard?
or any muscular endurance, I'd be like, I'm going to eat
Yeah.
a bunch of food.
High intensity work and weight loss do not play well at all. Low intensity work and weight loss, much better possibilities.
Doesn't mean that high intensity work it mandates or predict or makes weight gain a thing that's going to happen. It's more difficult to lose weight there comparatively speaking to that lower intensity.
It's just
stuff.
not the right time.
Yeah. Let's see.
Not the right time to target it.
Peter asks, hey guys, question about training stress. Does weekly training stress need to be going up week after week during the base phase? If I decide to do a harder workout than the base plan prescribes, do I need to compensate by upping the TSS for the subsequent weeks?
Yeah, ideally. I mean, if your body can tolerate a certain level of stress and then the next week you're going lower in stress, you're probably going to cost yourself a bit of fitness, or at least you're going to plateau, probably more likely plateau. But the fact is, if you want to progress, you have to keep pushing your current boundaries. So, yeah.
And I think there's one other way, just what we talked about before, is you can get 400 TSS in 1 week doing the shorter intervals with breaks, and you can get the same TSS with like the same time at sweet spot by doing longer intervals.
And that's a form of progression, though.
Yeah, exactly.
So
but just not going to reflect training stress isn't like
doesn't
the
paint
end
the
all
whole
be all.
picture.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's one thing just to keep in mind.
That's a good point.
Tom says, my race season has just started, so I'll be racing nearly every weekend. How should I mix this with the TrainerRoad plan? We talk about that pretty regularly on how to substitute races for those or I should say substitute your workouts for races on the weekend, or whether it be like a spirited group ride or anything else like that. We usually recommend people just train through those races, like don't taper off for anything like that unless it's a high priority event, and then replace it with the workout that you have planned on that day. And then once again, going back to what we talked about earlier, make sure that you keep present and you're very, 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 I guess, aware of the fatigue that's going on in your body. Because a lot of the time those races can be really hard, or that group ride can be really hard, and might put you in a bit of a hole. So you'll need to do some adjusting and dial things back perhaps a bit. But yeah, that's it. I mean, honestly, and people, people race all the time through Sweet Spot Base, and they race just fine with that. So
Doing it now.
yeah, exactly right. And you're still plenty fast. So
Thank you, Jonathan.
don't hesitate. Yeah, you're very fast. Fascinate.
Ryan asks, my focus is on cyclocross in the fall, but I want to do the local High Cascades 100 on July 20th in the 10-hour range. What would you recommend? Should I switch gears for doing the 100-mile race versus like crits and high-intensity cyclocross?
I think that I would do the high-intensity stuff and then let whatever happens on that big day happen. I find that you can build up a lot of fitness that can get you through like a 100-mile race. I think the High Cascades 100 is a gravel race, if I remember correctly, but I may be wrong. I'll do some Googling.
I thought Ryan was talking about actual gearing.
Oh, was he actually talking?
I don't know. I would switch to definitely have different gearing.
In that case, yes.
Right,
if it's actual gearing.
Crit versus 100-mile.
Yeah. If it's actually, if that's the case, then definitely. Oh, mountain bike race. Forgive me. Totally different there. So I assume that you're not going to be racing your mountain bike in a crit. So you might be talking about changing gears, I guess, figuratively. Because the reason I say that is for a mountain bike race, especially if you're going to be targeting like a mountain bike race is going to be 100 miles. Chances are it's going to have a lot of surgy stuff. That type of fitness that you've built with the crit racing is going to pay off there. You'll be surprised at how far you can stretch that crit fitness on a long day. Unless you're really targeting this thing, I would say train for the shorter, harder, surgy stuff and then let what happen on the Cascade day myself. That race looks fun. I want to do that.
Yeah, so I'm going to paraphrase this question for you, Chad.
Okay.
But Buddy says, if your training stress, let's say your average is consistent, but your FTP is steadily increasing, thus, like, actually your work capacity is going up, right? So TSS doesn't show that. You know what I mean? Like, if I'm doing 2x20s at 250 watts and I do it at 300 watts, work capacity is going up. TSS is going to be the same.
Yeah, so again, that's another demonstration of how TSS doesn't paint the entire picture. So maybe you're doing 300 TSS a week of aerobic endurance, and then you're doing 300 TSS a week of a combination of over-unders and VO2 max work. It can be the same TSS, but different form of stress, different level of adaptation.
So you don't really need to care about. Oh, it's not always about ramping. That's just it's not primary about. It's a primary is about getting stronger.
It doesn't completely sum it up.
And doing more work, not about just getting the number.
This is one of those times where you can just step back and say, "Is my performance improving?" And it is.
Yeah.
So you're doing something right.
Something somewhat similar along those lines from Leonardo. He says, "Is it bad to keep doing base plans and never go to a build or specialty if you're not competing?" And it's not necessarily, I guess, bad, but I'd have fun with it.
You can really only bring base to a certain level, though. So at some point, you have to build upon that base. I know it sounds literal, but it's the base fitness can only be progressed to a certain point. And you have to start to stress it in a different manner. I mean, your body gets really good at doing something that you throw at it all the time. So you're going to have to mix it up at some point if you want to continue to improve.
I'd have fun with it too. Like, and so if you don't have a deadline that you're preparing for, and after you finish that base plan, try something that's a little off the wall, right? Like try something that's like short power build or sustained power build, like since you aren't locked into constraints, you can kind of do what you want. I think that it'll honestly make the training more interesting too.
Yeah, honestly, I've gotten to a point where I can't really do anything for longer than 3 weeks. 3 weeks, I need a pretty substantial change to keep me interested and motivated.
David asks, quick question. You mentioned before that you should practice with the TT helmet to get used to the weight. In your experience, about how long before your event should you start practicing getting used to the helmet?
I don't honestly that's not what I was trying to get across. I don't think the weight's going to be the big issue. I think the eye line or your visibility is going to be the issue because I've found my position and I love it and I know full well because I've actually donned my helmet that I can get my head up to a point where I can see the horizon.
Yes.
I've before made the mistake of thinking my head's in a position where I can see it, I'm good, but my helmet rested in a different manner. A single ride would have shown me that. So it's not something you have to practice frequently. You just have to know that you can do it. I don't think any helmet's so heavy that it's going to be a real factor over the course of a time trial. You tell me, Nate, over like an Ironman.
Aero helmets, aero helmets are particularly light because they tend to be a little bare bones on the protection side of things from what I've seen in a lot of cases. So,
I've never done a time trial longer than an hour though. So you tell me.
Well, I have net problems and I absolutely think that, so indoor, you don't need to wear a helmet, but outside, I like the idea of using all of my race day equipment outside every ride because everything is a little bit different. Hot day, aero helmet. How does this feel, right? Skin suit, how is the chamois feeling? Aero wheels, can I handle them in the wind? We've talked about this a lot on the podcast. A lot of people get into a crosswind with aero wheels. They get up and then you're losing all this time and you spent $2,000 on wheels. So I would just do it. I don't care what people think. and I'm going to get some Strava
But you
maybe stuff.
You say every day, and we do a lot of our training indoors. So
No,
you don't get
every
outside,
time I go outside,
which is
with my
once or twice a week.
so coming up, I'll probably do once a week, depending on the weather, outside on my TT bike,
That makes perfect sense.
and I'll do complete aero gear,
Yeah.
shoes, shoe covers, skin suit.
I'm going to argue the case for very occasional usage of your helmet inside, as in like maybe just once and then you've got it done. Like what Chad was saying, I think
Cooling's too difficult to wear a helmet the whole time
Oh,
indoors.
heck yeah. And I think that, so here's one thing that you'll miss, though, that you could possibly catch indoors with wearing your TT helmet just once. You don't need to keep wearing it, but just if you do it once, you're able to get a picture of hopefully the realistic position that you'll be maintaining. I find a lot of people, they might just go outside and ride with whatever helmet they have. They may have never seen that from the side profile, and they recognize the fact that when they are actually holding their head at that normal level, that the tail's sticking way up on that helmet. So it's a good way to be able to just like work those variables out and find out if that thing's digging into your shoulders or not. But it's not something you need to regularly do. Now, outside, though, I think that that's a great idea. If you're riding a TT bike, I don't understand why you wouldn't be using the stuff that you're going to be racing with.
I think if you're working towards, you're 8 weeks out from a particular time trial, a weekly endeavor where you fully kit up and employ everything that you're going to use that day makes
Great idea.
awesome sense.
Right? Yeah.
Could help you build like that routine to kind of put you in the mode too.
Yes.
TT update.
Familiarization.
Oh,
Bikes have been ordered.
Yeah, they
Jonathan did
have.
it.
Yeah.
Let's go through our bikes.
So Giant Trinity for Chad.
Giant Trinity as is, unless the NV bars work on it.
Yeah, which we'll see. I am going to be on a Trek Speed concept, and the bars will not work on that one because that one's, of course, very, very
These bars are
unique.
pretty adjustable, though, yeah.
Yeah.
Jonathan's in the. Dan said that bike would fit him.
And I don't need a lot of adjustment, thank goodness.
Yep.
I'm pretty. I'm basic. So.
And then I think I'm going to be on the Cervelo. Well, I am Cervelo P5
Yep.
with the NV bars too
Yeah.
for adjustability because I need a lot of stack. Like
It's like the only bike that fits you.
yeah, people are going to laugh at me about how much stack, and then
See,
I don't
mine-
care.
Mine looks kind of ridiculous, but
No,
it feels
yours.
so good.
So I'm going to have the same top stack as you, and then about this much spacers below. So it's going to be a lot. And we'll see when we go to. We're also going to go. Have we even talked about this?
Yeah, I'm not sure if we have. We're going to go down to the Velodrome in LA in Carson, California with Aero Sports, and we're going to do aerodynamic testing. It's not a wind tunnel, and I think that there's actually an advantage in this case because you actually get to ride the bike,
Moving. Yeah.
and you ride the bike. You can ride the bike at the pace at which you'll be racing, which I think is a key thing because a lot of the times aerodynamic benefit changes depending on the speed at which you'll be going. So if we know roughly the speed that we'll be maintaining or we plan to maintain on that race, then we'll be able to say
the watts.
when the watts too. We'll be able to say at that velodrome, okay, I should be riding at this intensity, and that's where I want to collect my aero data. It's going to be really cool. And that's in the middle of March.
The only thing you don't get are crosswind data, but I think that's actually more important for bike manufacturers and not us because
What do we do about that?
Yeah,
then?
what are we doing in the crosswind like?
Exactly. Yeah.
Swap wheels.
Granted, like there may be
I'm kidding.
there may be a situation where you know that you're just going to have a consistent crosswind for some sort of a TT, and you may know that certain wheels are going to be better or certain helmets, something like that.
And more like a certain frame would be better in a crosswind, but then you would, you don't need. All that data is out there.
Yeah.
So, and then people have done it. So the price for us, for three of us in the wind tunnel, what was it going to be?
$27,000.
$27,000. And so we said, nope.
Sorry, we're not a pro team.
And then
Pro
for
tour team.
2 hours down there, how much?
I think that, for one rider, I think that it's $500 per rider.
Yeah, and that's enough to like dial in your position.
Which, if you think about that, how much money we all spend on our training stuff, that's not that expensive, man.
Well,
I mean, in all things
yeah.
considered, like for how much money we spend on the stuff
5
that
years,
we
5 years of TrainerRoad might make you even faster. But
Yes,
it's
true
But
story.
the nice thing is, you do this, you don't have to train.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? You just spend the money. You have to travel, so there's that too.
Yep.
But if you do that, you can gain. And there's plenty of videos out there. People gain like 20 watts, right, by position alone. 20 watts. Think how long it takes to train to gain 20 watts. So it'll be really cool. We're gonna do a whole video around it to see what happens, and we'll also talk about our results. We'll spoil the video a little bit, and tell everyone what happens.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Let's see. And then Darren says, can you get these videos on YouTube? Darren, we are live on YouTube as we speak right now, so you can tune in there. Any other questions you guys want to cover? We're pretty much out of time. I think we're
good.
Are we good? Cool. Oh, the last thing, Mark says that we should add Valparaíso Cerro Abajo to our list of races. That's an urban downhill. I don't think that we'll be doing that one.
Oh, is that crazy one?
Yeah.
No way.
I don't think we'll be doing that one.
That's fun to watch. That
a
one.
rad
watch.
Yeah.
No, my palms sweat watching it. It is so fast.
And that city, the streets, they make San Francisco streets look like calm.
That might be the craziest race I've ever seen.
It's
I'd
pretty
love to
nuts, man.
watch it,
It'd be amazing.
like in person.
Let's
Oh,
go
yeah.
to Chile. Let's do it right
Zoom.
now. I'm all for
Let's
it.
do it. We'll go mountain biking in Chile.
All right. So thanks everybody for joining us, and you can join us again next week, typical time. We'll talk to you all on Thursday. And remember, submit those questions in between now and then at trainerroad.com/podcast. Share the podcast with your friends, other cyclist folk. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye bye.